After I discovered my fiancé's secret wife and her pregnancy, I took back my $48,000, exposed his lies, leaving him publicly shamed and fired. I'd been with Matthew for 3 years and engaged for approximately 1. We met at a friend's wedding, hit it off right away, and I believed we had a very decent relationship. He worked as a project manager at a large firm where his mother also worked in human resources, and we lived together in his San Diego condo. Matthew traveled to Mexico for work roughly once a month, for 4 to 6 days. He consistently said the same thing. They had large projects near Mexico City that required his direction. His company had foreign clients, so it made logical. He'd always return with small things for me, like tequila, homemade jewelry, and these adorable sugar skull decorations I'd collected. I felt it was nice that he constantly remembered me on his difficult work trips. Another thing I should have questioned was Matthew's strange behavior on social media. He didn't have Facebook or Instagram and claimed to cherish privacy, so whenever I shared images of us, he begged me not to identify his name or include too many details. He explained that it was because his organization worked on federal contracts and was stringent about their employees' web presence. Again, reasonable enough that I didn't doubt it. We were engaged, and the reality began to unfold. Matthew's mother held a large engagement celebration for us last spring. She invited everyone from their firm, including individuals I had never seen and several of Matthew's cousins who lived a few hours away. During the party, I overheard one of his coworkers conversing with another about Matthew's trips. They both looked at me, and instantly changed the subject when they noticed I was around. Later that night, Matthew's cousin Eric became quite drunk, and began talking to me while Matthew was socializing. Eric started saying crazy things like, "So, you're the American girlfriend?" And Matthew liked to leave his options open. When I questioned what he meant, he just smiled and replied, "Nothing. Nothing. Just family jokes." When I informed Matthew about it later, he became very defensive, claiming Eric was an alcoholic who constantly attempted to cause trouble. After that party, I became more attentive. Matthew always carried the same tiny leather duffel bag on his Mexico travels, and he was strangely protective of it. He'd unpack it himself and quickly put everything in the washer, and I realized I'd never seen what was inside the bag. I once inquired playfully whether he was smuggling narcotics, and he became enraged, stating I didn't trust him. When Matthew left on his next business trip, I did something I'm not proud of, but thank goodness I did. I searched our condominium. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but something felt odd about his home office desk, which was buried under warranties and old bills. I discovered a second phone charger, but not for his iPhone, it was for the Samsung. Matthew didn't own a Samsung. I also discovered some dollars from a Mexican bank and a photo strip from a photo booth folded up at the back of the drawer. The photo strip depicted Matthew with his arm around a lovely Latina woman. They were making ridiculous expressions, kissing, and looking like a happy couple. I kept looking and discovered an envelope with a receipt for a wedding ring that was not mine. The receipt was in Spanish, and came from a jewelry store in Mexico City. It was dated roughly 18 months after we started dating, and 6 months before he proposed to me. I photographed everything with my phone, and then returned everything precisely how I found it. I considered addressing him immediately when he returned, but something prompted me to wait and gather more information. If he had been leading a double life for years, I needed to know the whole story before blowing everything apart. When Matthew returned from his trip, I behaved absolutely normal, while surreptitiously scrutinizing his every action. He brought me back a lovely hand-painted porcelain bowl, kissed me as if everything was okay, and told me about his exhausting meetings. I smiled and nodded, while crying inside. The next morning, he left his iPad on the kitchen counter while showering. He'd never told me his passcode, but I'd seen him use it enough times to figure it out. I opened it and discovered everything. Matthew had a whole distinct account that I'd never seen before. The name on it was Matthew Alvarez. He had added a second last name that I had no idea he had. He exchanged messages with someone named Isabella. Hundreds of them, filled with love notes, images, and plans. That was when I realized Isabella was not his girlfriend or mistress. She was his genuine legal wife. They married in Mexico City 3 years ago, and he was already engaged to me. Even worse, in his text to her, he explained my existence by stating that I was his mentally ill sister, who could not live independently. Thus he had to care for me part-time in the United States. He informed her that I was unstable, delusional, and occasionally confused about our connection. That's why he couldn't bring her to the States just yet, in case I had an incident. The text revealed that he planned to relocate her to the United States once her visa was approved. They had an entire timeline planned out. Meanwhile, he continued pushing back our wedding date, claiming that he wanted to save more money or wait for a promotion. But what really crushed my heart was that Isabella was 6 months pregnant with his child. The texts contained ultrasound pictures. They had been trying for more than a year, and she was due in 3 months. He had been creating a nursery in their Mexico City condominium, while also planning a wedding with me. The iPad alerted me to a new WhatsApp notice, which I clicked on without thinking. It led to his interaction with Isabella, who had just received a video of her pregnant belly moving as the baby kicked. The note continued. "Your daughter is dancing this morning. We miss you so much, mi amor. Only 8 weeks until you meet her. I love you." I captured screenshots of everything. He scanned and stored their marriage certificate, photos, ultrasounds, texts, and WhatsApp communications. I emailed everything to myself. Backed it up to my cloud storage. Then carefully placed the iPad back where he had left it. I needed time to reflect and plan my next steps. This wasn't simply cheating. This was a deliberate years-long double existence with a pregnant wife, and plans that only included me as a cover tale. And he had depicted me as mentally ill, in order to explain my presence. I called in ill from work for the next 3 days while Matthew was at his office, claiming to have a stomach bug. Really, I was looking up everything I could about Matthew's life in Mexico, Mexican marriage laws, and what the hell I was doing next. That's when I discovered Isabella's Instagram account. It was not private. There were hundreds of images of her and Matthew together, including family gatherings, vacations, and their wedding. Her bio boldly proclaimed, "Baby girl coming June 2024. I spent hours browsing through her account, watching my relationship crumble in real time, and seeing photographs of them building the nursery together on his previous work trip. When Matthew told me he was at a conference in Denver, he sent me pictures from their wedding. During family events, he was introduced as her spouse, while I sat at home, thinking he was working late. The most recent post is from 3 days ago. It featured Matthew caressing her pregnant tummy, with the remark, 2 more months until we become 3. So blessed to have found such an amazing husband and father for our little girl." I was physically nauseous. But I was also enraged. Not only sad or sorrowful. Furious. This man had stolen years from my life, while leading a completely different life with someone else, and he had informed her that I was his delusional sister. I needed to decide, should I face Matthew immediately? Do I contact Isabella? Do I just vanish and leave him wondering what happened? Each option appeared unfinished. I wanted them both to understand what kind of man he was. After considerable study, I decided that my vengeance should be measured and complete. There was no imminent confrontation that he could avoid by lying. He'll have a difficult time getting away. First, I needed to contact Isabella, but I couldn't just text her and say, "Hey, your husband's been engaged to me for 3 years. She was 6 months pregnant." I had to be careful how I approached this. Plus, what if she doesn't believe me? What if she believed I was precisely what Matthew described? A delusional lady making up stories. I needed incontrovertible evidence and a plan to thoroughly expose Matthew to Isabella, his family, his company, and everyone. And I needed to make sure I was safe in the process. That night, I carefully planned out my strategy. I had evidence. I was filled with wrath. And I had nothing more to lose. Matthew had no idea what was coming to him. First, I spent the next morning practicing what I wanted to say to Isabella. This wasn't only about me anymore. This poor woman was starting a family, with a man who had created a complex web of deceit. But before I contacted her, I needed more evidence against Matthew. While he was at work, I walked through our apartment and photographed our life together. Our engagement photos, wedding venue contracts with both of our names, receipts for deposits we had paid, and the ring on my finger. I discovered our vacation photos, family holiday photos, and everything else that demonstrated we were not brothers, but rather a couple preparing a future together. I also accomplished something that still makes me feel totally badass. I went to our bank and withdrew my portion of our joint savings, which was around $12,000. We'd been saving for our wedding and honeymoon, and I wasn't going to let him use my money to start a life with someone else. I opened a new account with a different bank. When I closed my half of the joint account, the teller asked if everything was okay, and I simply explained that I was surprising Matthew with a financial consolidation plan. She purchased it totally. I made copies of our lease agreement, which showed that we lived as a couple rather than as siblings. I also found old birthday cards he'd sent me with words like, "To my beautiful fiancée," and "Can't wait to call you my wife." I gathered evidence of our relationship and his falsehoods. Then came the difficult part. Contacting Isabel. I couldn't simply DM her on Instagram. If Matthew had seen the message first, he would remove it and block me. I needed to send her an email directly. After some scanning through Matthew's texts, I discovered her personal email account, which she used for purposes other than talking with him. I opened a fresh email account just for this reason and wrote a message. I didn't want to come out as the furious other woman, or as insane, which was precisely what he said I was. I typed something simple. "Isabella, I have important information regarding Matthew that you should see. This will be painful, but you deserve the truth." I've attached only 3 things to get started. A current photo of Matthew and me at his company's Christmas party from 4 months ago. A copy of our leasing agreement. And a photo of my engagement ring with the date we were engaged. I gave her my phone number and told her I had more documentation if she wanted to see it. But I understood if she needed some time to analyze it first. At 11:43 a.m., after triple checking everything, I pushed submit. On a Wednesday. Then I waited. I expected to have to wait several days, if not weeks. I assumed she'd believe it was a hoax, or that Matthew would intercept the email in some way. However, at 2:17 p.m., I received a call from an international number. I almost dropped the blasted thing while answering it. It was Isabella. She was chatting quickly in Spanish, and then switched to English when she realized I couldn't understand her. She inquired as to my true identity and whether this was a cruel prank. I told her everything. How long Matthew and I had been together, our engagement, and our living arrangements. She repeatedly interrupted, asking specific questions about Matthew. His shoulder birthmark, a scar on his knee from a childhood injury, his favorite meal, and the names of his parents. It was odd, like we were exchanging notes on a novel we'd both read. Only the book was about a man we both thought we knew. As I confirmed each detail, her voice became shakier. I could pinpoint the exact instant she accepted the truth. She went silent for around 10 seconds before weeping. Not delicate tears, but the deep, guttural crying that occurs when your entire reality crumbles. Between sobs, she informed me that Matthew was scheduled to fly down the next week for a doctor's appointment. They were going to view their newborn girl for the first time through a 3D ultrasound. She had been arranging their apartment for his visit. I asked if she needed any more proof. She did. I sent her everything while we were on the phone. Engagement images, wedding venue contracts, holiday pictures with his family, and text conversations. As she received each one, her tears changed into something else. Pure anger. She began telling me about their lives, how they met 5 years ago, while Matthew was on a true work trip to Mexico City. How he'd pursued her, told her he'd fallen in love at first sight, and planned his work schedule to incorporate regular travels to Mexico to see her. They married 3 years ago, in a quiet ceremony attended by her relatives. Her brother was first skeptical of this American who could only visit on occasion, but Matthew charmed everyone. Then she told me what he'd told her about me. According to Matthew, I was his disturbed younger sister who had bipolar disorder and delusions. He claimed that I sometimes thought we were in a relationship, and that he had to entertain me to keep me stable. He told her he was striving to get me good care, so he could someday bring her to the United States. But it was tough due to my illness. I was furious because they used mental illness as a cover tale, making me appear unstable and deluded. It was quite cruel to both of us. The chat lasted about 2.5 hours. Regardless of her emotional state, Isabella was fiercely clever and practical. She wondered if I'd faced Matthew yet. When I declined, she proposed something I hadn't considered. "Let's coordinate," she said. "Let's not give him any warning. Let's make sure he can't wiggle out of this, or create more lies." She wanted to fly to San Diego with her brother, and confront Matthew face to face. And she knew exactly where to do it. At his workplace. Where his mother and co-workers could see everything. Part of me was concerned about the stress this would cause her pregnant. But Isabella informed me that her doctor had cleared her to fly, and that her pregnancy was healthy and uncomplicated. Her brother would also be by her side to provide support. We created a plan. She would travel up with her brother Carlos in 2 days. She didn't inform Matthew that she was coming. Instead, she acted normally during their discussions, assuring him she was looking forward to his arrival the next week. Meanwhile, I would continue to behave as if everything was normal with Matthew at home. These 2 days were the most difficult of my life. sleeping next to him, making small talk at supper, kissing him goodbye in the mornings, all while knowing what type of monster he truly was. He had no idea I'd spoken to Isabella or knew anything. He once received a call from her while we were watching TV, and I observed him enter the other room, drop his voice, and tell her how much he missed her, and how excited he was to see her and the baby. I had to dig my nails into my palms to stop screaming. Janet, Matthew's mother, called me the night before Isabella was due to come. Just a typical check-in regarding wedding planning. She inquired if we had selected a date yet, discussed venue alternatives, and noted that she had been looking at mother of the groom costumes. The whole talk felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. Did she know about Isabella? Was she involved in this deception? I couldn't tell, so I cut the talk short by saying I wasn't feeling well. I had a breakdown after the phone call. What is the social protocol for meeting your fiancé's secret wife? Instead, she sat across from me, put her hands on her belly, and simply said, "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for telling me the truth." We went over our strategy one more time. Matthew's company occupied 3 floors in a downtown office building. Visitors had to sign in at security, although Matthew's mother, Janet, worked in human resources on the first floor. Our goal was to approach her personally, provide our proof, and request that she bring Matthew down to the conference room. We wanted witnesses, but we didn't want to create a situation that would put Isabella under excessive stress. When we arrived at the registration counter, I asked for Janet and explained that Matthew had a family emergency. The receptionist called, and Janet arrived minutes later, her face anxious until she saw me. Then she grinned, perplexed as to why I was there with a very pregnant woman and a stern-looking man. I introduced Isabella as Matthew's wife. Janet laughed. Assuming it was a joke, I handed her the evidence folder. She opened it, still happy, and discovered the marriage certificate. Her expression went utterly blank as she flipped through the images, papers, and evidence of her son's other existence. Janet did not say anything. She just called the receptionist, and requested that Matthew be sent to conference room A right away. Then she took us down a hallway. We sat silently in the conference room. Janet appeared to have aged 8 years and 8 minutes. She kept glancing at Isabella's pregnant belly, then at me, and finally back at the documents. Finally, the door opened, and Matthew went in. Puzzled. He spotted me first, then Janet, and his look shifted to concern. Then his gaze fell on Isabella and Carlos, and his entire face collapsed. There is no other way to explain it. Every drop of blood drained from his face, and for a moment I feared he'd pass out. "What's going on?" he muttered. But it was evident that he understood exactly what was going on. His dual existence had just clashed in the most spectacular way possible. Carlos sprang up, pointed at Matthew, and said forcefully in Spanish that I couldn't understand. Matthew backed up against the wall, shaking his head, desperately searching from face to face for an ally but finding none. "You told me she was your mentally ill sister," Isabella remarked. "You built a nursery for our daughter while planning a wedding with her." Matthew began stammering about misunderstandings, complex situations, and how he could explain everything. But there was no answer that could excuse what he'd done. I stood up carefully and removed my engagement ring. I set it on the meeting table and slid it towards him. "I think your wife might want to know why you've been engaged to your sister for 3 years, I said to her. Janet had not spoken till then. She looked at her son and asked a single question. "Why?" The little word conveyed so much grief and uncertainty. Matthew began crying, claiming he loved both of us, that he became involved in something he couldn't control, and that he never intended to injure anyone. Every justification made me furious. He was still attempting to manipulate the situation in order to portray himself as a victim. That's when Isabella jumped up, placed her hands protectively over her abdomen, and informed Matthew exactly how she felt about him in rapid Spanish that required no translation. When Matthew approached her, her brother stepped in between them. Security arrived at that point. Apparently, heated voices in the meeting room drew attention. Janet, still in astonishment, explained that there was a family matter that required solitude. Unfortunately, it was too late. People had gathered outside the glass walls. As Matthew began to make excuses, I spotted his company's CEO looking from outside the room, his demeanor deepening as he figured out what was going on. Just as security asked us to go, I made one last move. I turned to Janet and gave her the third folder. I made copies of everything for HR. "Your son committed marriage fraud," I informed them. "And I think his employer should know the kind of person they're trusting with company business." We were let out of the building, but not before I noticed Matthew's co-workers watching, chatting, and admiring the sight of a man caught between his fiancée and his pregnant wife. Isabella grabbed my arm as we were in the parking lot. Her face was teary but resolute. This wasn't over, I heard her say. There were legal implications to what Matthew had done to both of us. Her brother, Carlos, who had been generally mute, now spoke in proper English. He was a lawyer in Mexico City, he clarified. What Matthew had done was not only morally reprehensible, it was potentially criminal. Bigamy is illegal in both countries. As we stood there absorbing everything, my phone buzzed with a text from Matthew. Please let me explain. I never meant to hurt anyone. I love you both. Please. I showed it to Isabella. She laughed bitterly as she showed me her phone. He had sent her nearly same message. Even now, he was attempting to play both roles. Second update. Following the confrontation, Isabella, Carlos and I returned to the coffee shop across from Matthew's office building. We were all shivering with adrenaline, wrath, and the sheer craziness of what had just occurred. The barista kept looking nervously at our table, perhaps because Isabella was crying and violently punching at her phone screen. Carlos was speaking quickly into his phone, and I was sitting there with a strange hollow laugh that came out every few minutes. We must have appeared absolutely agitated. My phone would not quit vibrating. Matthew had sent 18 text messages in the 30 minutes since we left his office. They varied from desperate, "Please just talk to me," to manipulative, "This isn't fair. You're not letting me explain," to threatening, "You have no idea what you've done to my career." I showed them to Isabella, who merely rolled her eyes and turned her phone around to show me the practically identical Spanish messages he had sent her. Rayoni looked up from his phone and informed us that he had been conversing with a colleague who specialized in international family law. The matter became difficult because the weddings crossed international borders. But one thing was obvious. Matthew committed bigamy, which is unlawful in both the United States and Mexico. If we chose to take legal action, we could. While we were talking about this, Matthew's mother, Janet, entered the coffee shop. I almost did not recognize her. She appeared absolutely destroyed. She asked if she may join us. When Isabella nodded, she sat down firmly in the vacant chair. Janet was straightforward. She informed us that Matthew had been removed out of the building and placed on immediate administrative leave pending an inquiry. Matthew's supervisor was outraged, not only because of the personal issue, but also because he was fabricating his travel reports. These excursions to Mexico were not all business. He had been billing the corporation for flights and rooms while leading a double life. That was grounds for termination. Then Janet did something unexpected. She began apologizing to both of us. She revealed, through tears, that she had doubts about Matthew's actions, but had told herself she was being overly paranoid. Isabella reached out to take Janet's hand. That simple gesture devastated me. This very pregnant woman, who had just had her entire world broken, was comforting the mother of the guy who had betrayed her. It was both breathtaking and heartbreaking. Janet requested a picture of the ultrasound. When Isabella showed her, Janet covered her mouth and began to cry again. "I'm going to be a grandmother," she repeatedly stated. "I didn't even know." Then Janet turned to me. She explained that she understood if I never spoke to anyone in their family again, but she hoped that one day, I would forgive her for not seeing what her son was doing. I told her that there was nothing to forgive. Matthew had deceived all of us. His lies were not her responsibility. The conversation turned to practical matters. I informed them that I had already moved my essential belongings to my friend Olivia's home and would pick up the rest when Matthew was not present. Isabella explained that she had to fly back to Mexico City tomorrow. Her doctor didn't want her to travel so close to her due date. Carlos said he would stay an extra day to assist me if necessary. Matthew called Janet's phone while we were still talking. She responded, putting it on speaker without informing him. Matthew was frantic, pleading with his mother to help him fix this, claiming that his entire life was falling apart. Janet's response was icy cold. She informed him that he had created the situation himself, and would now face the consequences. She claimed she had raised him better than this, and she was ashamed. Then she hung up. My phone vibrated with a notification. Matthew sent an email with the subject line, "Please read. I can explain everything." It was now early evening. We exchanged contact information, and planned to stay in touch. Janet hugged both of us before departing, offering to help Isabella in any way she could, regardless of what happened to Matthew. Carlos assisted Isabella with their rental car, while I returned to Olivia's apartment, emotionally weary. I texted Olivia the essentials, but when I came, I broke down and told her everything. She was horrified. She kept expressing that she had always believed Matthew was too wonderful to be true. But she never expected this. She assisted me in unpacking my emergency bag and setting up her guest room, after which we ordered takeout because neither of us felt like cooking. While we were dining, I received a call from Matthew's cousin Eric, the drunk at the engagement party who had made those strange remarks. He explained that he had heard about what had transpired from another family member, and wanted me to know that he had tried to warn me in the only manner he could without breaking his pledge to Matthew's father. Apparently this was not Matthew's first double existence. Eric stated that years before I met Matthew, he had done something similar with women in Los Angeles and San Francisco. He never got married. But he had meaningful relationships in both locations, and traveled back and forth. When Matthew's father found what was going on, he put him into therapy and made the entire family pledge never to discuss it again. They assumed he'd sought therapy and had conquered some sort of psychiatric problem. Eric apologized for not being more direct throughout the party. He explained that he had been debating whether to tell me outright. But family loyalty and the booze had forced him to take the coward's way out by dropping hints. I thanked him for calling, but informed him that his hints had been absolutely unhelpful. He realized he deserved it, and asked what he could do to help right now. I advised him that the greatest thing he could do was ensure that everyone in the family knew exactly what Matthew had done this time. After hanging up, I informed Olivia about the call. She was as surprised as I was to learn that this appeared to be a recurring pattern for Matthew. We remained up late looking through social media for additional ladies we might warn, but there was nothing clear. Around midnight, I received a text message from an unfamiliar phone number. It was Matthew's father, George. His message was brief but unambiguous. Matthew was in a state when he arrived at their place, and George wanted to talk to me. I showed Olivia, and she immediately told me not to go alone, if at all. I agreed and texted back that I didn't have anything to say to him or Matthew, but if he wanted to talk, we could meet in public tomorrow. George answered almost immediately, saying he understood my caution but wanted to make things right in any way he could. He suggested meeting for coffee the next morning, promising Matthew would not be present. I consented, partly out of curiosity about what setting things right may entail in this case. George was already at the coffee shop when I arrived. He got right to the point. He apologized for his son's behavior, saying the entire family was distraught. Then he passed the check across the table. I looked down at it. It cost $40,000. I looked at him in bewilderment. George said that he recognized money couldn't undo what Matthew had done, but he wanted to reimburse me for any wedding deposits I'd lost, as well as additional compensation for the emotional suffering. His specific remarks suggested that this was a business transaction, or a legal settlement. I recognized he was attempting to purchase my silence, by making me leave quietly. I pushed the check back and told him I did not want his money. I wanted him to understand that his son was a predator, who had fooled 2 women for years, and that his prior attempts to ignore Matthew's actions had allowed this to happen again, this time including a child. George appeared astonished. He plainly did not expect me to refuse the money. As I was leaving, George called after me, asking what I was going to do next. I informed him openly that I hadn't made a decision yet, but that purchasing my silence was not an option. His expression hardened, and he continued. Matthew has made mistakes, but he is still my son. I will protect him in any way I can. When I returned to Olivia's car, I was shaking. She wanted to go back and face George, but I simply wanted to leave. As we drove away, I told her about our talk, and the check. She called George every name in the book, and that we meet with Carlos before he traveled back to Mexico, to keep him up to date on this development. Carlos was checking out of his hotel when we arrived. He was not surprised by George's attempt to buy me off. Apparently, he made a similar offer to Isabella via email overnight, which she quickly shared to Carlos. The money offered to her was far higher. $150,000. Ostensibly for the child's future. Carlos had told her to disregard it for now. Carlos showed me a few messages from Isabella. She had returned to Mexico City safely and had met with her own family. They were all rallying behind her, enraged over Matthew's lie. Her doctor had examined her and determined that, despite the stress, both she and the baby were doing well. She planned to file for divorce as soon as possible. That afternoon, I finally mustered the guts to return to the condo to retrieve more of my belongings. Olivia came with me for support, and we planned it around when I knew Matthew would be at his parents' place based on Janet's texts. The condo was disorganized. Matthew had clearly been there, and had a tantrum. There were broken dishes in the kitchen, clothes scattered across the bedroom, and empty liquor bottles on the coffee table. I immediately grabbed more of my possessions, focusing on sentimental items and irreplaceable financial documents. As I was packing my jewelry box, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Hidden beneath my necklaces was a little velvet pouch with a ring I'd never seen. It was not my style. It was extravagant and flashy. The pouch contained a slip of paper with the jeweler's logo, and a date. 3 months from now, another engagement ring. I showed Olivia, who seized the ring and suggested we take it to be appraised and utilize the money for a fresh start. I hesitated, not wanting to go down to Matthew's level, but Olivia insisted that he owed me at least this much. I finally decided to keep it, until I spoke with the lawyer Carlos had suggested. As we were leaving, Matthew's automobile pulled into the parking lot. Olivia and I hesitated before rushing to finish loading my car. Matthew spotted us and dashed over, blocking my driver's side door. He began pleading with me to listen, claiming that he could explain everything, that he knew he had made a mistake, but that he still loved me. When I attempted to get around him to my car, he grabbed my arm. Olivia instantly stepped in between us, urging him to back off before she contacted the police. Matthew then turned on Olivia, telling her that this was between him and me, and that she should keep out of our personal affairs. I had never seen this side of him before. Desperate, violent, and almost insane. I told him firmly that we no longer had a relationship, and that if he didn't let me leave right away, I would call the cops. That was when he discovered the box containing the framed images of us that I had taken. He lunged for it, exclaiming, "I can't take those. They were also his." During the tussle, the box collapsed and glass broke everywhere. I took advantage of the opportunity to get into my car, with Olivia hopping into the passenger seat. As I started the engine, Matthew smacked his hand on the window, leaving a sweaty handprint and yelling that he'd lose everything if I didn't help him fix this. His work was on the line, his family was disintegrating, and Isabella's family was considering filing charges in Mexico. I rolled down the window just enough to remind him that he should have considered it before living a double life for 3 years. Then I backed out, forcing him to move away from the car, and drove away, leaving him shouting in the parking lot. That night, I texted Isabella to check in. She emailed me a snapshot of herself with her family, looking fatigued yet supported. She told me that Matthew had been calling her parents' house non-stop until they disabled his number. He was now contacting her every hour, alternately apologizing, making excuses, and expressing his want to be a part of his daughter's life. Isabella informed me that her lawyer was already working on the divorce paperwork, and had advised her to document all contact from Matthew. She also indicated that Carlos had spoken with the lawyer he had recommended to me, and they wanted to coordinate our responses so Matthew could not influence either of us. While communicating with Isabella, Matthew discovered that I was staying with Olivia. He arrived at her apartment building after midnight, and buzzed each apartment until someone let him in. He hammered on Olivia's door, waking up not only us, but also numerous neighbors. Olivia contacted building security, who removed him from the property, and warned him that they would call the cops next time. But Matthew was not done. He waited in his car in the visitor parking lot all night, texting me about how he just wanted to chat, how he wouldn't go until I heard him out, and how he could explain everything, if I gave him 5 minutes. Around 3 a.m., the messages turned darker. He began criticizing me for overreacting, claiming that I had damaged his life via what was essentially terrible communication. He claimed I had no right to contact Isabella, and that I had endangered his unborn kid by causing her mother so much anguish. I showed Olivia the messages, and she insisted on calling the police. They arrived and forced Matthew to leave, but without a restraining order, there was little further they could do. By the morning, Matthew had upped his effort. He'd gotten my parents' new phone number and called them, telling them I'd suffered a mental breakdown and was making outrageous charges. Fortunately, my parents understood me better than that. My father had clearly instructed Matthew not to contact them again. I finally fell asleep around 6 a.m., completely exhausted. Olivia awoke me around 11 a.m., looking apprehensive. My phone had been continuously buzzing. And it wasn't just Matthew. His father, George, had also called, along with numerous other unknown numbers. I checked my voicemails and discovered that George had left 5 messages, each one more frightening than the last. He'd started with money offers, then moved on to barely veiled comments about making things unpleasant for everyone concerned. The end message was clear. Back off, stop talking to Isabella, and sign the NDA he had drafted, or he'd make sure I regretted it. The unknown numbers came from Matthew's buddies, whom I had only seen once or twice at a party. They all sent the same message. I needed to talk with Matthew. I was breaking him. He was not eating or sleeping. He might try something desperate. It was an organized guilt trip, and it enraged me. I emailed all of the voicemails to the lawyer Carlos had connected me with. Then I prepared to meet Sophia, his sister, for lunch. Sophia was already in the restaurant when I arrived. When she saw me, she stood up awkwardly, unsure whether to hug me, shake my hand, or both. I made the decision for her with a short hug before we sat down. The conversation began awkwardly. Sophia constantly apologizing for Matthew before realizing that apologies couldn't make things better. She described their family as chaotic. Their father was on full damage control mode. Their mother was devastated and enraged. And Matthew was experiencing what Sophia described as a breakdown. Then Sophia said something that made everything make sense. Growing up, Matthew was always making intricate lies and different versions of himself. He told different buddy groups quite different stories about his life, interests, and even his summer vacations. When caught, he'd always have absolutely acceptable justifications that made everyone feel awful for questioning him. Matthew's parents had taken him to therapy as a teenager, but he was charming and brilliant. He might persuade the therapist that his parents were overreacting to typical adolescent behavior. By college, they'd given up on attempting to fix it, expecting he'd grow out of it. Sophia began to cry as she claimed she had noticed indicators of Matthew's deception with me but had convinced herself it was not her place to intervene. I stretched across the table to take her hand. I told her it wasn't her fault, and that Matthew was clearly a great manipulator. She gripped my hand and told me she'd always wanted me as a sister-in-law, and she was devastated by everything, especially the niece she'd only recently discovered about. As we spoke, I saw a man watching us from the bar. It took me a second to recognize him. It was Ethan, one of Matthew's closest college pals. When he noticed me looking at him, he hurriedly glanced away, and seemed to be very engrossed on his phone. With a sickening feeling, I realized Matthew was still keeping an eye on me, using his pals to track and report on my travels. I pointed him out to Sophia, who was humiliated. She instantly rose up, came over to Ethan, and challenged him so loudly that several surrounding tables turned to see. Ethan muttered something about just happening to be there, but Sophia wasn't buying it. She told him he was pathetic for letting Matthew pursue me, and that he needed to leave right away or she'd make a spectacle he'd never forget. Ethan slunk off, and Sophia returned to the table, apologizing for her brother's actions. It confirmed that she was being truthful with me. Sophia requested if I would consider meeting with both of their parents after lunch to address things. I was immediately skeptical because of George's menacing voicemails. Sophia assured me that it was not a trap. Her mother had insisted on it, pushing George to comply. She believed they needed to hear directly from me what Matthew had done, without filtering or reducing. I told her I would think about it and talk to my lawyer first. As we were leaving the restaurant, my phone rang. It was an overseas number. Isabella was panicking. Matthew had talked his way past the security at her parents' building in Mexico City, and was standing outside their apartment, refusing to go until she spoke with him. Her family had contacted the cops, but Matthew was making a commotion, ranting about his rights as the baby's father. Isabella was afraid and asked if I knew someone on the US side who could help handle Matthew. I called Janet immediately, and she answered on the first ring. When I informed her what was going on, she went very quiet, and stated she'd handle it. Isabella texted 10 minutes later, saying Matthew had received a call, and had quickly departed. Janet allegedly threatened to cut him off financially and legally if he did not leave Isabella alone immediately. That evening, I visited with the attorney Carlos recommended. He reviewed all of Matthew and his father's messages, threats, and abuse. He advised filing for a restraining order right away, and documenting everything for possible future legal action. He also told me that cross-border legal issues could be tricky, but he would work with Carlos to guarantee Isabella and I were safe. Last update. The week following the confrontation became a nightmare of relentless harassment. Matthew would not quit calling from various numbers. I'd block one, while he called from another. In only 2 days, I banned 13 distinct numbers. Each voicemail was more frantic than the last, crying and pleading before becoming angry, and accusing me of overreacting. As if finding out your fiancé has a large secret family is something you can overreact to. Matthew figured out where I was staying and arrived around 2 a.m., beating on Olivia's door and yelling that he needed to speak with me. The neighbors phoned security, who threatened to contact the police if he would not leave. Matthew eventually left, but not before slipping a 7-page handwritten letter under the door detailing his version of the story. I read the letter. The biggest error ever. It was sheer manipulation. Matthew claimed that he became caught in the scenario with Isabella due to cultural expectations following a one-night affair. He had attempted to terminate it several times, but she was unstable. That he intended to tell me everything after our wedding. Each paragraph was more diluted than the next. He somehow portrayed himself as the victim in all of this. I ripped it up and threw it away. The following day, Janet called me. Matthew was officially sacked from his work. Following an internal inquiry, the corporation alleged false travel bills and inappropriate behavior. Apparently, he had been charging the corporation for his excursions to meet Isabella while saying they were for work. She informed me that Matthew was staying with George, refusing to eat or shower, instead sending messages to Isabella and me. I received a restraining order after he showed up at my employment, causing a commotion that resulted in security escorting him out. The judge granted it promptly after reviewing the evidence. 18 messages from various numbers. A recording of George threatening me, and testimonials from witnesses who had observed Matthew's increasingly erratic behavior. Carlos called with updates from Mexico. Isabella had filed bigamy allegations against Matthew, and the Mexican authorities were examining the case seriously. Matthew was now effectively barred from entering Mexico. Amporin. If he tried, he would be apprehended at the border. This meant he'd probably never meet his daughter. At least not on his own terms. The restraining order appeared to finally convince Matthew that he couldn't pressure me into forgiving him. Instead, he devoted his entire attention to saving his relationship with Isabella. He sent her family expensive gifts that they returned unread. He attempted to contact her doctor's office, claiming he needed information regarding his child. They turned it down right after Isabella warned them. Isabella went into early labor, approximately 5 weeks after the confrontation. Janet flew to Mexico City to be with her, with Isabella's approval. Matthew attempted to join them, but was halted at the airport when his passport was flagged. He ended up having a complete meltdown at the terminal, which was recorded and shared online. The footage showed him ranting about his rights as a father as security prevented him from boarding a flight he was not permitted to take. Isabella's daughter was delivered healthy 2 days later, despite being a few weeks premature. She emailed me a photo with the simple caption, "Thank you for saving us." I cried when I saw that small, lovely face, thinking about how different things could have been if I hadn't found that iPad. Matthew's reaction to becoming an invisible father was to get blackout drunk and crash his car into a tree. He was not gravely harmed, but he received a DUI. As for me, I am gradually rebuilding my life. I moved into my own apartment last month. I reverted to my maiden name and secured a new position. The craziest thing is that I'm truly glad things occurred this way. If I hadn't discovered the iPad, I might have married him. I might have had kids with him. I may have spent decades with a man living a double life before learning the truth. Instead, I left before the deeper entanglements made separation impossible. Matthew's most recent message came from yet another burner number last week. The 60th that I've banned thus far. All it said was, "Living in my car again. I hope you're both happy now. We are." Caught my wife cheating. Filed for divorce. And she tried to destroy me by bribing my family to testify against me. But I sued them and won $70,000. Well, I'll do my best to keep this brief. My ex-wife had been cheating on me, so I filed for divorce a few months ago. I caught her in bed with one of my pals. And it was sufficient evidence for me, even if I had no other proof. In a matter of days, I filed for divorce, but she began to seek an absurd amount of alimony from me, saying that she earned it because I had mistreated her during our marriage. I had always been really kind to her, and we had been married for 3 years after dating for 5. That kind of thing had never occurred. However, she was lying merely to exact revenge on me for divorcing her, rather than forgiving her, as she had requested. She earned nearly as much as I did. Even still, she insisted on receiving alimony because she wanted to be made whole for all that she had endured. My word against hers was all that existed. Thus, the situation was already rather complex. To make matters worse, she chose to bribe my family, with whom I already have a bad relationship. In an attempt to turn the tables on me, they obviously testified against me, and I was positive that my ex-wife had bought their testimony. They repeated the same things she had told them like parrots. Therefore, what was happening was rather obvious. Fortunately, I had the facts on my side, and the judge was a fairly sane and bright man, so he could see right through what was happening. Her claims were rejected, and she didn't receive a dime from me. I eventually obtained what I wanted, although it took a few more months. But a few weeks ago, I made the decision to charge my parents, my older sister, my wife, and my family. I want them to feel the same way I have been feeling for the past few months. Therefore, I'm suing them for $40,000 apiece. They had pushed me emotionally to the limit, tried to extract money from me, and lied about me. I got promoted a few weeks ago so I could afford to do this because I had been putting all of my effort into my work to keep myself occupied. I will at least receive something even if I do not receive $40,000 from each of them. That much, I'm confident, because they have no defense and my attorney is quite competent. My family isn't so willing to fight, but my ex-wife is. Since we are family, they want me to drop the lawsuit against them. They say they only sided with my wife because we already don't get along, and they reasoned that she must have been telling the truth, only to discover later that they had been duped. In essence, they are pretending to be innocent, and want me to overlook it because we are related and I didn't have to pay my ex-wife anything in the end. Therefore, by now, everything ought to be forgiven. However, I don't believe that's how it ought to operate. Rachel is suing my family because they gave false testimony against me during my divorce. Update the first. I appreciate all of the comments left on my post. You folks are so kind to be so encouraging. At the very least, it helps me feel less alone because I have been in pain for the previous few months and haven't had many people with whom to discuss it. I can't discuss it with my pals, but I don't feel safe doing so given how private everything is. Of course, I can't talk to my relatives either. This has been a great way for me to just let everything out. In any case, I will proceed with the lawsuit. I'm not going to back down just yet. After much consideration, I don't believe they are deserving of my pity. Until I have their bank records, I will be unable to provide proof. But I am positive that they were bribed and fully accepted it. I would have accused each of them of perjury. However, since everything is already dependent on our words and actions and we don't have much more evidence, my lawyer told me not to go with it since it would be very challenging to prove. All it will do is drag things out. Therefore, we continued to charge emotional distress and malicious prosecution against my ex-wife. We took precautions, and even if I don't receive $40,000, I will still receive something. That's the objective. The money is not what I'm after. Teaching them a lesson is my goal, and I will stop at nothing to achieve it. It has nothing to do with my ex-wife specifically. But she also deserves this. I'm more disappointed in my family than in her, though, because they haven't always been like way, despite what most people here think. Actually, I used to get along great with my parents and older sister in the past. However, they have been acting differently over the past few years, ever since I began working for this particular company, where I receive a rather substantial pay. In essence, they were constantly pursuing me for money, which is why we stopped getting along. Not just once or twice every few months. Mind you, I mean roughly every other week. Either my mother, father, or elder sister called or messaged me to let me know they were having a difficult time, and finally, despite my displeasure, I would just give in and send them some cash. And that was the beginning of all the issues. I should have simply been strict with my money from the start, to be honest. Rather, we developed a habit. I would simply give them money whenever they asked for it. I knew I made a lot more money than they did, so I would feel horrible if I asked for it back. My older sister is divorced and resides with my parents, who are both retired. She doesn't make much money, at least not compared to me, because she works as a high school teacher. They all desired a better lifestyle, but instead of working for it, they would just rely on me to provide everything. After a few months, it became rather unpleasant because I felt like they were taking me and my money for granted. In other words, they had enough money to maintain themselves. Naturally, my ex-wife and I were still going strong at the time, and we were even considering starting a family. I eventually informed my family that I no longer wanted to send the money because it was becoming exploitative. I informed them that I also needed to consider my future. I needed to start saving money since I wanted to start a family soon. They had to put an end to their crazy habit of continuously requesting money from me, and then guilt-tripping me, when I refused until I eventually gave in. By then, we had a rather heated argument, but after a few weeks, everything was resolved. That's what I believed, anyway. In actuality, nothing ever returned to how it had been. And after that, I constantly felt as though they were treating me coldly. We began to distance ourselves within a few years, which is why by the time I filed for divorce, our relationship was already strained. Clearly, my ex-wife was aware of it. She chose to exploit our tense relationship by having them testify against me and disparage me in court after I had told her in confidence. Sadly, that didn't work out for her. I knew she wasn't in dire need of the money or the alimony, so I don't really understand why she wanted to get back at me so aggressively. She only wanted to get even with me for divorcing her, rather than giving her another chance, as she had requested. She shouldn't have cheated on me in the first place if she was that desperate to keep her marriage intact. As far as I was concerned, we were completely content, so I don't understand why she did that now, and I never will. In any case, it is pointless to consider all of these issues at this time. Now that it's all over, my only concern is the future. And I sincerely hope that they won't ever again play me. Right now, I'm going to use this lawsuit to ensure that. The second update. Hi there, everybody. Since my last post a few weeks ago, the case has continued to proceed. My ex-wife and my family have been doing everything they can to avoid giving me the money, but my lawyer and I are sharks at the moment, and the negotiations haven't gone their way thus far. I don't want to delve into the specifics. This might go to court if they disagree, which would be considerably worse for them. Not really, in my opinion, as I now have more than enough money, and although some may be upset that I'm squandering it by pursuing them, I don't give a damn. Right now, at least for my own mental health, this is really vital. That's the legal side of things anyway. Things have been somewhat strange in my personal life. After the divorce was finalized, my ex-wife and I sold the house we shared and divided the proceeds, leaving me a single man. I've been renting a tiny apartment close to my place of employment. Other than a few acquaintances, no one knows where I reside. However, my older sister showed up at my place a few days ago, so I assume someone figured me out. She was the only one, and I was somewhat surprised to see her via the peephole because I didn't think my family would be aware of my whereabouts. I was at home because it was the weekend. But I acted as though I wasn't just to get her to stop bothering me. Before she ultimately became irritated and left, she continued to ring the doorbell and waited outside for me to either come out or at least answer the door for 15 minutes. Although she did leave a message at my door, I didn't open it until I was positive she had left and wasn't even in the building anymore. In any case, the message I received stated that it was from her and my parents, who wanted to talk to me face to face without the use of attorneys because, at the end of the day, we were family, and things were becoming somewhat challenging at home. They seemed to want to work things out with me. Since they testified against me in court, I had blocked them, and I had no intention of unblocking them for this reason. I simply tossed that note away. However, she returned to my place at the same hour the following day. I was on the phone with a coworker just before I left for work at that moment. Since she had already heard my voice inside and brought it up, there was no purpose in acting as though I wasn't home this time. She began shouting out to me as soon as she heard me enter, saying that she was aware I was there and that I was unable to leave. I couldn't be putting my family through this, and pretending that everything was justified. So I needed to talk to her and work things out. Since my coworker was on the phone, I must admit that I was really annoyed. I also believe he heard my sister shouting from outside the door, though it was very faint. I then promised to give him a call back later. Since I honestly simply wanted to get this over with, I then made the decision to open the door and speak with my sister. She came into the house without even asking permission, closed the door behind her, and began yelling in my face, accusing me of being crazy and telling me to think about my family, but I couldn't act in this way and expect to get away with it. Without even waiting for me to speak, she launched into her tirade about how I had caused the family to suffer and how, despite the fact that we rarely communicate with our family, it seemed like everyone was talking about us. Sincerely, I have no idea who may have discussed it, but that isn't the point. She was basically angry that I hadn't even begun. I considered our elderly parents, who are now retired, and must dig through their money. They are always concerned that their retirement fund will be depleted due to the high cost of the lawyer. Additionally, the costs will only go higher if I win this action, or if it gets to trial. She claimed that she has been having financial difficulties as well, and they've all had a really tough time at home. Even though I have more than enough, and don't need the $40,000 I'm requesting, I don't seem to care about any of it, and I'm determined to exact revenge on them. She told me that I was being petty, and that I should move on from this since I was making everyone around me suffer a lot and I wouldn't be satisfied with the outcome in the end. I simply told her that since I genuinely don't care, she didn't need to worry about my conscience. After everything I had been through, this is essentially nothing, so I was perfectly okay with putting them through all of this. They have each other, at least. I was fighting by myself and had no allies. And they never once made an effort to consider me, or the suffering they had caused me. They have a lot of guts after all that. I sent her here to speak with me, attempting to bargain as though she was capable of doing so. I informed her that she was fortunate that my attorney and I had not chosen to press charges of perjury, because we were certain that they had been bought off, and had taken the bribe to lie under oath, in order to give my ex-wife what she wanted, after which they would demand a larger cut. Nothing was more important to them than money. At the moment, I was simply acting in the same manner as they had and abiding by the same set of rules. They had no right to doubt my morality. She remained silent for a few seconds because I had completely lost my temper there. I had begun yelling at her, and she appeared to be surprised by my actions. She probably thought I was simply going to let it all go, and didn't really intend to hit back at her. She took a few seconds, nevertheless. She relaxed. She expressed her sincere regret for all that had gone wrong. They had been struggling for a long time, though, and ultimately, everyone desired money. Things have been really tough for them since I quit helping them. They didn't feel comfortable asking me for money anyway because of how aloof I've been for the past few years. I had already informed him that I didn't want to assist, as it stands. Thus, they had no other option. Clearly, there had been a lot of animosity between them and me. They therefore chose to support my ex-wife in the divorce. She gave the impression that I couldn't hold them accountable for that since, presumably, they think I was the one who initially put them in that predicament. In any case, she informed me that if I simply received $40,000 from each of the four of them, rather than from each one separately, or perhaps even a little more, we could still end this. However, it was just excessive to expect $40,000 from each individual in this manner. It was ultimately going to be useless, because it would take a long time, and I would have to keep squandering money on my attorney. She claimed to be aware that my intention was to discipline them. After all, I wasn't after the money. They were clearly intelligent enough to recognize that. She also said she had talked to my ex-wife and her parents. And it was decided by all that this would be the best course of action. However, they wanted to talk to me face to face, and let me know that this was something they had been considering before bringing it up during the discussions. Everyone would be able to move on with their lives without any more problems, at least. At that moment, I recall thinking, at least now we're talking. At last, she wasn't just acting like a victim. Instead, she had a reason. I actually calmed down for a little while at that point, and told her I will give it some thought. But for the time being, I just wanted her to go away, because I had to leave for work and couldn't afford to waste any more time in this manner. By having me rage at her, she had already ruined my mood and squandered my morning. I didn't want to experience any more of that. She then informed me that she would be happy to travel. In the first place, she had come over to discuss this with me. And instead of being so evasive about the whole situation, it would have been much simpler if I had just talked to her the day before. I considered disputing with her, but I simply didn't want to start a quarrel. I was already somewhat late for work. More time was not something I wanted to waste. I simply let her leave and went to work. I was slow. I gave it some thinking, and I contacted her in the evening, a few hours after returning home, to let her know that I needed more time to reflect. A few days have passed, and I believe I will accept her offer since, in the end, this was all about teaching them a lesson, which I believe I have done. They all appear to be troubled enough. All of this carries a serious danger. Ultimately, though, I want to put all of this behind me, and go on with my life. After taking all into account, I believe that accepting their offer would be the best course of action because, as it stands, I don't really need the money. I am aware that many people may not think this is a wise decision, especially in light of the possibility that I may receive exactly what I requested if I choose to reject this approach, drag the matter out, and take them to court. However, I don't want to do that because it will ultimately be a massive waste of time and money for me as well. I'm going to give her a call in a few days, and let my sister know that I'm prepared to accept this offer. Hopefully, it will still be in effect, and they won't have changed their minds by then, but I don't think they will do it today, considering how desperate they are. The third update. Hello. At last, I gave my sister a call. For that, I had to unblock her. Nevertheless, I told her over the phone this morning that I was prepared to accept their offer. She also promised to let me know as soon as she spoke with my ex-wife and our parents. Naturally, I also discussed this with my lawyer, and he believes that reaching a deal is acceptable. We hope to conclude this matter in a few days. In any case, my sister did put me on the phone with my parents when I called her today. I really didn't want to talk to them, so I was on the verge of hanging up. My mother, however, told me that she truly did not like what I was doing at the moment and persuaded me to stop before I did it. She informed me that they truly did not deserve this, and that I had spent the last few weeks making them all feel as though they were living in a nightmare. My family was acting like the victim once more, and I wasn't really interested in listening to them. My sister had already talked my ear off about it when she came over earlier, so I interrupted her in the middle of her sentence and told her that I really didn't want to know what they had been through. I didn't want to relive it because they didn't care about me when I was going through my belongings. No one got in touch with me to see how I'm doing. Therefore, expecting anything from me at this time is really strange. Since they are aware that they do not currently have the moral upper hand, they should just be happy that I chose to accept that offer and let them go. And I could have just as easily dragged this out, brought them to court, and made their situation even more difficult. However, I decided not to. Therefore, rather than expecting an apology from me, they should just be pleased that I changed my mind and let things go. She stopped talking after that, and I hung up on them. Seizing the chance, since everything will be resolved shortly, I can finally move on with my life, which is what I truly want. Therefore, I'm glad I took this decision. I'm tired of getting even. That is no longer necessary for me. In the future, hopefully, things will be better. Without a doubt. I'm crossing my fingers. Update 4. My last update was 2 weeks ago. Due to an assignment that required me to travel last week, I became quite preoccupied with my work. Nevertheless, we worked with our attorneys to resolve the matter, and I received $70,000 that they all contributed. After several meetings and discussions, I finally got things done the way I wanted, and I'm really happy about it. Clearly, I no longer communicate with my ex-wife. Therefore, we were also done once this was finished. Even if it's their own fault, I suppose my family finds it difficult to comprehend that I have made the decision to sever all ties with them. Just the day before I was set to leave for my assignment, my sister returned to my house, this time accompanied by my parents. I feigned that I wasn't home since I was busy packing in the hopes that they would leave. However, my sister must have recognized that I was using this tactic, because she cried out to me and threatened to stay until I opened the door, and made the decision to talk to her. This action truly irritated me. I informed her, and my parents, that this was becoming out of control. So I opened the door. I didn't understand why they had reappeared after everything had been resolved. They couldn't act in this way, and expect me to put up with it, I told them. And because this was becoming absurd, I threatened to call the police and request a restraining order against them the next time they appeared. My mother then got into a heated argument with me, accusing me of treating them disrespectfully. Furthermore, I couldn't ignore my heritage, and act superior to them in the end. They talked about how they brought me up. They had carelessly spent a great deal of money on me, feeding, clothing, and educating me, among other things. And I had to explain to them that the law compelled them to do all of that. They were gravely misguided, if they didn't want to do that, and if they thought of it as a favor to me. In the end, I felt that whatever they did was their responsibility. So if they were unwilling to do that, they should have either placed me for adoption so that those who were genuinely eager to care for children could have done that. It's not as though they made a special effort to help me. They had to do whatever they did because they were my parents. It wasn't as much of a favor to me as they believed. Regardless, whatever needed to be done was done in the end. There was no need in repeatedly approaching me, annoying me, and attempting to get me to speak with them. I had already made up my mind that I didn't want to interact with them in any way, and I made that choice in the end. They had no right to claim to be my family after what they had done to me and how they had violated my trust. I then told them that I was contacting the police, and slammed the door in their faces. Naturally, I didn't. But they were gone when I checked a few minutes later. To be honest, I don't know why they are so eager to stay in contact with me. They didn't really like me before. Even now, I'm aware that it's only because they want to have options in case they ever need money. It isn't related to me personally. It has nothing to do with how much they pretend to love their family. They are much more angry with me in my opinion, since I can see right through them. They can remain angry though. It hardly matters to me anymore. I'm content with my life right now. Yes, it is somewhat isolating, but that is irrelevant. At least there aren't any poisonous people around me that want me harm. In any case, I believe this will be my final update for some time. My life is going great right now, and I want to experience it. Therefore, I would like to thank everyone who followed through on this. Every single person who left a comment and offered me support has my best wishes. I'm grateful. everyone. My husband begged me for forgiveness after I found out he paid his ex $35,000 behind my back. No mercy, I took back every penny and left him homeless. With this mess, I'm not even sure where to begin. I've been dating Matthew for a little more than a year, and our relationship seems to be going great. He was always very attentive, we had similar future aspirations, and we hardly ever fought. This fall, we even discussed moving in together. I believed that after years of unsuccessful dates, I had finally found the one. That dream, however, was dashed last Friday. My phone was dead, and I needed to seek up a recipe. I then took his laptop. His banking app was still logged in when I opened it. I didn't mean to pry, but I was instantly drawn to a recurring payment. What does someone called Rebecca rent for $650 a month? Would he give $650 a month to someone he had never spoken to? I asked Matthew directly who Rebecca was as soon as he got out of the shower. Everything was clear from the expression on his face. After becoming quiet and strange, he asked me why I was curious. I informed him that his banking app showed the payment. He took a seat and acknowledged that Rebecca was his ex-girlfriend prior to our meeting. He seems to have been covering all of her rent for years. Even during our time together, he insisted that although they were no longer romantically linked, they were close friends and that she required financial assistance. I inquired as to how frequently they spoke. His response: nearly every day. For a year, he had daily communication with his ex, but he never once told me about it. He had the audacity to respond that he didn't believe this arrangement had anything to do with our relationship because it was merely financial support for a friend when I inquired whether he ever intended to inform me about it. Only monetary assistance? He has given her more than $35,000 during our relationship. The worst aspect was that when we talked about future plans or trips, he would occasionally say he was short on cash. He felt it was more equitable that way, so we even divided the bill half the time on dates. He was mailing his ex-girlfriend almost $1,800 every month in the meantime. I felt like a complete moron. I told him to leave my apartment right away. He persisted in attempting to clarify, claiming that there was context and that I was exaggerating. I didn't comprehend. What the background was didn't matter to me. All I needed to know was that I had been supporting my ex while concealing a connection with her for a year. My phone was inundated with his texts after he left. Numerous messages explaining that I misinterpreted things, that he ought to have informed me sooner, and that it wasn't what it appeared to be. That evening, I blocked his number. This individual had the audacity to deliver flowers to my place of employment the following day. I warned him to leave, or I would contact security, and I wouldn't speak to him. I didn't care if my coworkers were staring at me. When my manager intervened, he eventually departed. He sent me a lengthy explanation via text that evening, which I ignored without reading. He then began reaching out to my friends in an attempt to persuade me to speak with him. Fortunately, they all told him to stop. I basically concentrated on processing everything for the next week. I mentally reviewed our connection, searching for any clues I might have overlooked. There were undoubtedly moments when he would go outside to answer calls, or seem strangely protective of his phone. Because I trusted him, I would dismiss these. What a fool I was. I spoke with my closest friends, and they all agreed that I had taken the right decision to stop things right away. Rachel, one of my friends, even said that she had always felt Matthew was too ideal and questioned whether there was a problem. Sam, you made a great observation after the event. My sister Grace was the only one who didn't support me right away. She hesitated and asked if I was certain I got the complete story, when I told her what had transpired. I hadn't given Matthew a chance to explain the agreement, but she said perhaps there was a good reason. I reminded her that he had kept this significant emotional and financial commitment from me for a year, regardless of the reason. That couldn't be forgiven. But even after we hadn't spoken for 2 weeks, Grace's remarks continued to resonate with me. What if there was more to the tale? Perhaps it would clarify how I'd been so totally duped, but it wouldn't alter my decision to end our relationship. Matthew sent me multiple fresh messages as soon as I cleared his number. In order to explain everything, the most recent one merely requested if we could meet in person. He claimed to have papers that would clarify the situation. Records? What form of justification requires written records? I decided against my better judgment to meet him at a coffee shop close to my flat tomorrow. I stated unequivocally that this was not about making amends. All I needed was closure. I'm sitting here now questioning whether it was a mistake to even give him the opportunity to clarify. A part of me needs to know the whole truth, but another part wants to cancel. I want to know how someone I thought I knew so well could have such a double life, at the very least. Is it foolish of me to accept to meet with him, Reddit? Should I simply go on without finding a solution? Has anyone else had a comparable circumstance where a valid explanation for anything similar was found? Should I also get his ex's contact information so I can hear her side of the story? I don't even know if she is aware of me. I'll provide an update following our meeting tomorrow. I would appreciate any advice in advance. He has demonstrated that he is a fairly skilled liar. Grace walked to a nearby table after noticing that our conversation was becoming heated. I was feeling so overwhelmed that I was thankful she was here. I departed after telling Matthew that I needed time to think things through. I essentially collapsed as Grace followed me out, and we headed directly to her place. It was terrible enough to learn about Rebecca, but learning that he has a child that he concealed from me is even worse. Grace was just as surprised as I was. Even she hadn't anticipated something this serious. But she had urged me to listen to him. She inquired about my plans for the future, and to be honest, I'm still unsure. I thought about this scenario from every perspective last night. The financial arrangement is made more reasonable by the fact that Matthew is providing for both his child and his child's mother, who suffers from a debilitating illness. Nonetheless, there is still a great deal of dishonesty. What sort of individual makes up that they are a father? What kind of father pretends he doesn't exist and just sees his child once a month? The more I consider it, the more Matthew's treatment of his son troubles me. I received more texts from Matthew this morning asking if we could speak again. I still need to grasp more about the problem, he replied. I chose to investigate on my own after ignoring his texts. I discovered Rebecca on Instagram after searching for her on social media. There are numerous photos of her, and a little child who resembles Matthew on her publicly accessible account. Everything seemed so much more genuine after seeing those pictures. While perusing her posts, I became aware of an oddity. There were multiple pictures of her with Edwin, another man. I kept scrolling through the posts, and came across ones where she tagged Edwin as Ben's bonus dad, and talked about how much he helps with Ben's care, and how fortunate they are to have him in their lives. The captions said things like, "Date night, with my love and 3 years with this amazing man." They looked really cute. This is illogical. Why is Matthew still covering all of her rent, if she has a committed partner who is active in Ben's life? Grace came over right away to look at the postings with me when I called to let her know what I had discovered. We discovered one dated almost half a year ago, in which Rebecca declared her engagement to Edwin. However, Matthew has kept paying her rent the whole time, and has never brought this up. Given Rebecca's medical expenses, Grace speculated that Edwin might not earn enough money to sustain them. However, something doesn't make sense. Why does Matthew continue to provide them with such substantial support if he is only seeing his kid once a month and Rebecca has a fiancé who is actively involved in Ben's life? I'm beginning to question whether Matthew and Rebecca's connection is more complicated than he's revealing. Despite her engagement to Edwin, is it feasible that they are still romantically involved? Or is Matthew being coerced in some way? Although I'm inclined to contact Rebecca directly, I'm not sure if it would be inappropriate. If Matthew has also been lying to her, she may not even recognize me. Grace believes that in order to confront Matthew about what I discovered, and obtain the whole story, we need get together again. Matthew and I decided to meet tomorrow. I'm going to approach him with printouts of Rebecca's social media post. I'm curious about his connection with Rebecca, why he continues to provide for her financially, even after she got engaged, and above all, why he felt it was okay to keep his son hidden from me for a year. After my meeting with Matthew tomorrow, I'll provide another update. I'm simply trying to get ready for whatever new bombshell he might reveal right now. Edit. There have already been a lot of comments. Thank you all for your support. To address some frequently asked points, I did confirm Rebecca's MS diagnosis using the medical records Matthew provided. The dates and information appeared to be accurate. Many have speculated that Matthew may be concealing additional children or secret households. To be honest, I don't believe that. He appears really sad about our split. But it's obvious that I didn't know him as well as I believed. I should probably just walk away from people who question why I don't, but I can't help but desire answers. For me, this was a serious connection. We discussed getting married and having kids. I need to fully comprehend the fact that he already has a child that he concealed from me before I can go on. Many of you are speculating that their child may not be Matthew's, or that Rebecca may be using blackmail. I hadn't thought of these options, but I'm not making any snap judgments just yet. First, I'd like to hear his thoughts on the fiancé scenario. Yes. Grace will be my backup again tomorrow. The same public coffee shop is where we're meeting. Second edit. Some have suggested that I may be concentrating too much on the money issue, and not enough on the fact that Matthew neglected his parental duties. You're entirely correct. It is really unsettling that he was prepared to downplay his bond with his own child, in order to keep our relationship intact, regardless of his agreement with Rebecca. How could a father do that? Third edition. To those who say I'm exaggerating, and that I ought to give Matthew another chance because he was merely attempting to keep his family safe. Are you serious? He was really dating someone he said he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. But he lied about having a child for a year. No one is being protected by that. That is manipulative, and self-serving. Second update. I'm back with another update. And for some reason, things are getting more complicated. As scheduled, I met with Matthew yesterday. Grace joined me once more, and took a seat at an adjacent table. I prepared to confront Matthew about why he continues to provide financial assistance for his ex, when it is obvious that Rebecca has a fiancé, by bringing printouts of Rebecca's Instagram postings, demonstrating her relationship with Edwin. Matthew had already pulled out his evidence folder once more when I got there. He started giving me more details about his agreement with Rebecca, before I could even mention what I had discovered. He stated that he wanted to make some clarifications regarding our most recent discussion. I interrupted him and placed the prints from Instagram on the table. When he viewed the photos of Rebecca and Edwin together, his expression was conflicted. He seems resigned, rather than particularly astonished. I directly questioned him about why he had never brought up the fact that Rebecca had been engaged to another man and had been in a committed relationship with him for 2 years. Why does Matthew still cover all of their rent if Edwin is Ben's bonus dad? After a minute of silence, Matthew revealed that Edwin's finances are unstable. He's a struggling musician, apparently, hardly earning enough to sustain himself, let alone Rebecca and Ben. Matthew stated that he keeps paying the rent because he wants Ben to live in a stable home, particularly in light of Rebecca's medical conditions. I questioned why, rather than paying their full housing expense, he couldn't simply pay child support like any other divorced parent. He responded that because of Rebecca's medical requirements and incapacity to work full-time, typical child support would not be sufficient. He claimed that Edwin was aware of the arrangement he and Rebecca had made years prior when he began seeing her. Even while this explanation made some sense, it wasn't enough to excuse keeping everything from me. Matthew agreed when I told him so. He acknowledged that he had done a terrible job with everything, and that it was unacceptable to keep his son a secret. Then he made another shocking revelation. Our relationship isn't the only reason he only sees Ben once a month. Rebecca's restriction of his access to Ben is the reason. Matthew claims that when Rebecca initially fell ill, she became very possessive of Ben and feared that if she couldn't take good care of him, Matthew would take him away from her. In essence, she informed Matthew that she would only accept his financial assistance if he consented to restricted visitation during her period. Matthew consented since he was so concerned about Rebecca and Ben's stability. As time went on, this arrangement solidified. Rebecca became even more stringent about Matthew's involvement after Edwin joined the picture. Matthew showed me text conversations from the previous year, in which Rebecca continued apologizing, or flatly declining his repeated requests to see Ben more frequently, or have him stay the night. I questioned why he didn't use the legal system to fight for greater access to his son. He claimed he was worried Rebecca would distance herself from him, or cut him off from Ben entirely if he resisted legally. Additionally, he was concerned that the strain of a custody dispute would exacerbate her MS symptoms. In order to keep the peace, he continued to pay the rent and accept the meager amount of visiting. He gave me a little notebook that he had taken out of his folder. He had been maintaining a journal of all his interactions with Ben since he was born, and it was full with sketches, notes and short stories. There were pictures of them together at different ages next to the entries. I was deeply affected by seeing this. Although Matthew may have kept Ben from me, it is obvious that he loves his son very much. The journal entries, which were filled with things Ben had said, or done in their little time together, as well as Matthew's aspirations for their future together, were devastating. Additionally, there were notes about milestones he had missed, phone conversations they had when Rebecca permitted it, and gifts he had given. Matthew showed me this, and I asked him why. He claimed that even though he committed the grave error of keeping Ben hidden from me, he wasn't a father who deserted his child. He was attempting to manage an unachievable circumstance, where it seemed preferable to continue receiving financial support and having restricted contact, rather than taking the chance of no relationship at all. I was quite overwhelmed at this point. I told Matthew I needed to get some fresh air outside. Grace followed me after noticing. I attempted to make sense of it all as we sat on a bench outside the coffee shop. Grace made a point that I hadn't thought of. Could it be that Matthew was being tricked? It sounded like a potentially coercive setup. In essence, Rebecca is holding his child captive in return for money. Although it didn't justify Matthew's deceit, it did provide a fresh perspective on his circumstances. I spoke with Grace, and then returned inside. I informed Matthew that I wanted to talk to Rebecca directly because I needed to get the whole story. At this idea, he appeared relieved, which surprised me a little. He explained that in order to assist me comprehend the complexities of the situation, he had been hoping that I would wish to speak with her. I turned down his invitation to schedule a meeting. I wanted to speak with Rebecca without Matthew's help if I was going to do so. Instead, I asked for her phone number. After hesitating, Matthew handed it to me, and promised to SMS her to let her know that I might get in touch with her. I was even more perplexed as I left the coffee shop. You can't simply move on from hiding a child from your serious spouse for a year. After I arrived home, I contemplated whether or not to call Rebecca. How could I possibly respond? Hello. I recently learned about you and your son from your ex's girlfriend. I had to listen to her side of the tale, even though it felt really unpleasant. That night, I plucked up the guts to text her, introduce myself, and ask if we could talk. She surprised me by responding nearly instantly, and stating that she had been anticipating my message. We decided to get together this afternoon at a different coffee shop that is closer to her neighborhood. For the entire morning, I felt really anxious. Grace volunteered to accompany me once more, but I felt that I had to do this on my own. I knew Rebecca from her pictures as soon as I got to the coffee shop. Pale and thin, yet stunning. Thank goodness she was alone. I was not prepared to meet Edwin or Ben. We had a heated discussion. Although there were some significant discrepancies, Rebecca largely agreed with what Matthew had told me. She does indeed have MS. Indeed, Matthew covers their rent. Yes. Edwin has been her partner for 2 years, and is her fiancé. Rebecca, however, asserts that Matthew, not her, made the decision to restrict his access to Ben. She said that she had asked him to become more involved in Ben's life on several occasions. However, Matthew was continually making excuses about his obligations at work or elsewhere. She showed me texts in which she offered Matthew more weekend visits, or invitations to Ben's school functions, both of which he turned down. The texts Matthew handed me, in which he allegedly begged for more time with Ben, were from the same time period as these. I was totally perplexed by the conflicting evidence. Which one of them is lying? Additionally, Rebecca stated that although Matthew did tell her he was seeing someone new, he told her it wasn't serious and requested her to keep me out of the conversation if we ever crossed paths. This runs counter to Matthew's assertion that she was aware of the gravity of our relationship. When I inquired about the financial arrangement, it was the most upsetting aspect. According to Rebecca, Matthew first offered to pay the rent when she was first diagnosed, which is consistent with his account. However, she says she has made multiple attempts to lessen his financial commitment, particularly since meeting Edwin, but Matthew is adamant about keeping the arrangement in place. Rebecca claims that Matthew has often expressed to her his desire to offer this degree of support and that he would be offended if she turned it down. She acknowledged that the money has been crucial, particularly for her medical expenses. But she claimed that as her relationship with Edwin has grown more serious, she has grown more uneasy with their arrangement. Rebecca acknowledged that Edwin is a musician with little money, but she added that he does contribute what he can when I questioned why he doesn't do more. I thought it was sincere when she expressed embarrassment over their financial circumstances. I was much more perplexed at the conclusion of our talk. Either Rebecca is manipulating Matthew and is now attempting to persuade me as well, or Matthew is manipulating both Rebecca and me, or perhaps both of them are lying about some parts of the matter. I was exhausted as I left the meeting with Rebecca. Matthew texted me on my way home to inquire about Rebecca's progress. I didn't answer. I needed time to take it all in. I discovered a gift at my door when I arrived home. Matthew sent it. A message stating that there was more evidence on the USB drive that I should examine. Years of text messages between Matthew and Rebecca, further text exchanges, financial information, and even recorded phone conversations, some of which I'm not even sure are legal, were discovered when I plugged it in. I've been looking at these documents all evening, and they provide yet another perspective on the matter. Rebecca does appear to be limiting Matthew's access to Ben in certain conversations. Matthew seems to be the one restricting involvement in others. Both of them alternately advocate for greater or lesser assistance at certain points in time, as seen by the financial talks. To be honest, I have lost any sense of what to believe. It appears that both Rebecca and Matthew are rewriting the story to fit their own needs. Ben, caught in the center of whatever game these two are playing, is the only innocent person involved in this whole situation. I sent Grace a text with everything I found, and she is coming over tomorrow to help me sort it all out. She believes that I should provide Matthew with the conflicting evidence and observe his reaction. I've committed to seeing Matthew one last time tomorrow night. After that, I believe I had to get out of this problem entirely, no matter what he says. After our last meeting, I'll provide an update. I appreciate everyone's support during this difficult time. Edit. There are a lot of queries in the comments. I'll attempt to cover the most prevalent ones. Rebecca highlighted particular treatments and symptoms that would be difficult to manufacture. And the medical records appeared to be authentic. So I was able to certify that she does really have multiple sclerosis. Matthew and Rebecca may still be romantically involved, as many of you have speculated. I gave this some thought as well, but now that I've met Rebecca, seen pictures of her with Edwin, and heard her clearly show fondness for him, I don't think that's the case. Many have speculated that Matthew may not be Ben's biological father but rather his sugar daddy. That isn't true. In my opinion, Ben resembles Matthew identically, and both Matthew and Rebecca accept that Ben is their father. If you're arguing that I should just leave, you're most likely correct. However, it's difficult to simply walk away without knowing what occurred after a year of establishing a life together. Edit 2. In a few hours, I'll be meeting Matthew. I'm requesting direct responses and presenting all the facts from both sides. Tomorrow, we'll provide an update. Last update. Reddit. Hello. The last word on this whole fiasco. We appreciate your support during all of this chaos, everyone. Last night, I met Matthew for what I thought would be our final conversation. Grace arrived, but she remained outside in her car. I wanted to handle things myself, but I wanted someone close by in case something went wrong. I brought all the proof. Matthew's texts, Rebecca's texts, their various narratives, and the message in which he directly requested her to support his account. I told Matthew that I wanted the whole truth and laid everything out when he arrived. No more omissions or bullshit. Informed him that this was his final opportunity to be honest. After a long period of silence, he finally acknowledged that he hadn't been truthful with Rebecca or me. Here's what actually happened. After splitting up, Matthew and Rebecca's relationship never truly ended. He wasn't only helping Ben and his ailing ex with all that money. It was how he continued to be active in their lives. He ensured that Rebecca was unable to fully move on, even with Edwin there, by serving as their source of income. Rebecca also employed Ben as a negotiating chip. To keep the money pouring in, he occasionally lets Matthew see him, and occasionally doesn't. They have been manipulating one another for years, each utilizing the other's interests to achieve their own goals. About those strange, contradictory texts, Matthew acknowledged that he occasionally, purposefully declined opportunities to meet Ben, in order to subsequently lament his lack of access, and harm Rebecca's reputation. She would pretend to be trying while excluding him by inviting him to events, even though she knew he couldn't attend due to plans with me. He informed me that his ex-partners always left him when they learned about it, and advised him to get proper custody and end the financial issue when I questioned why he kept all of this from me. This dysfunctional relationship provided him a sense of purpose that he wasn't prepared to give up, therefore he didn't want to hear that again. Ben was the most problematic aspect. Although Matthew genuinely cares for his child, he has been abusing him in this power struggle with Rebecca. He wasn't merely trying to keep Ben away from me by hardly seeing him. It was the way things were before I was born. Being Ben's father is more appealing to him than really carrying out the duties of a father. I told Matthew that I had had enough of their drama. Recommended that he get therapy for his problems with Rebecca, and his parenting style. He advised him to make arrangements for Ben's maintenance and custody. He began sobbing and pleading for another opportunity, vowing to make things right. But it's too late. Sincerely, I don't want to be involved in their mess. And trust has been lost. I deserve more than to become entangled in the family drama of another person. After that, I texted Rebecca to promise not to get in touch with her again. Hoped they would figure out a better way to raise Ben, and wished her well with her health and engagement to Edwin. She simply expressed gratitude and regret for everything. For those who argue that, since he was providing for his family, I should give him another chance. It was not that easy. Any future we attempted to create would have been destroyed by the toxic nature of the entire scenario. No, to those who want to know if I'll check on Ben, I'm not supposed to be there. I feel sorry for the child, but intervening now would just make his already difficult situation more dramatic. My girlfriend blocked me for 5 days on a girls' trip. At the airport, I sent a process server with an eviction notice instead of picking her up. She said, "You don't need to know what happens on a girls' trip, that's why you're blocked until I get home." I didn't respond. However, when she returned to the airport expecting me, she discovered who was actually waiting for her. "I'm a private investigator. It's a job that will alter you. You learn to perceive the world via layers of truth and falsehood. You learn to read people based on what they do, rather than what they say, and more importantly, what they try to hide." Rachel, my girlfriend of 3 years, has always remarked that my profession makes me too cynical. The truth is that my job did not make me cynical enough. Our connection, I felt, was my only safe haven from the society I live in. It was the only place where I didn't have to search for the angle, the lie, or the underlying motivation. We were partners. We lived in my house, which I had purchased and paid for with a decade of hard nights and perilous assignments. We had same ambitions and a shared existence. I trusted her. In my line of employment, trust is the most valuable currency, and I had given her everything of it. The trouble began, as it frequently does, with a trip, a 5-day girls' trip to Las Vegas with her 3 best pals. Veronica, the ringleader, was twice divorced and constantly on the lookout. Sophie, the follower, mirrored Veronica's characteristics. Natalie was silent, but always appeared to be watching and calculating. I didn't like them. They were loud, shallow, and treated Rachel as if she were their cherished property, always reminding her of her wild days before meeting a boring, stable person like myself. I helped Rachel pack a few days before the vacation. I asked for her flight information and the name of the hotel so I might have it in case of an emergency. She turned to me with a peculiar, steely look in her eyes. "You do not need to know that," she said. I was taken aback. "What do you mean?" "I just want to know where you are." She crossed her arms and spoke with a nasty, dismissive tone. "It is a girls' trip, Derek. The whole point is to get away from everything, including you. You do not need to know what happens on a girls' trip. That is why you are blocked until I am home." I simply stared at her. Blocked. She was not simply seeking for privacy, she was proclaiming a 5-day blackout. She was making a distinction between her life and ours. I didn't react. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. In my line of work, when someone shows you a wall, you don't try to break it down. You find a way around it. My mind, trained to see everything, automatically switched to professional mode. The boyfriend was gone. The investigator had just checked in. "Okay," I replied, my voice totally calm. "I understand. Have a great time." Her confident, arrogant countenance faltered for a moment, followed by a glimmer of confusion. She expected a fight. She'd wanted one. A battle would have made her feel vindicated. My simple agreement left her with nothing to argue against. She left the following morning. I drove her to the airport. She was happy, enthusiastic, and already in holiday mode. As she exited the car, she leaned in to kiss me. "Do not miss me too much," she added with a wink. "I will call you when I land to let you know I am unblocking you." "I will not, I told you." She laughed, assuming I was joking. I watched her enter the terminal, dragging her bag after her. I then drove away. I didn't go home. I went into my office. The investigation had already started. She felt she was going to have a 5-day blackout. She had no idea I was going to flood her world with light. She expected me to be waiting for her at the airport when she returned. She was correct in a way. I wouldn't be there, but she was about to find out who was actually waiting for her. Update 1. Rachel left for her girls' trip 1 week ago. She has had a week full with parties, photos, and secrets. For me, it's been a week of quiet, systematic work, the kind of work I excel at. The first thing I did when I arrived at my office was basic. I checked the license plate of the vehicle that had picked up her 3 pals that morning. Veronica had shared a photo of the 4 of them in front of her house, ready to go. The car in the backdrop was a luxury SUV. The plate was returned registered to a man called Richard Hale. A brief search found that Richard Hale was a senior partner at one of the city's top investment firms. He was also married and has 2 young children. Interesting. Rachel had informed me that they were flying on a budget airline. A little investigation into airline manifests for Las Vegas that day revealed a different story. There were no commercial airplane tickets in her or her companions' names. However, a private plane owned by Richard Hale's organization had filed a flight plan from our city to Las Vegas that morning. The passenger list was not made public, but that wasn't necessary. The picture was already becoming clearer. The blocking was a gift. It was not a barrier. It was a confirmation of deception. She assumed it would keep me in the dark. Instead, it allowed me to function without having to maintain the facade of the trusted boyfriend. Her pals, however, were not as cautious. They were haughty. Sophie, the follower, maintained a visible social media profile. She was a wealth of information. She kept posting photographs and videos all week. They were all tastefully staged to resemble a girl's trip. Photos of the four of them drinking cocktails by the pool, a video of them dancing at a nightclub, and a selfie in front of a prominent casino. However, novices always make blunders. In one selfie, the reflection of Sophie's sunglasses revealed the unmistakable silhouette of a man seated across from them in a cabana. In the backdrop of a video from the nightclub, I noticed Veronica laughing and leaning closely against a man who was not her ex-husband. Natalie's biggest blunder was a photo she posted. It was a group photograph of the four of them at a formal dinner. A giant abstract picture on the wall stood out in the background. A reverse image search takes less than 5 minutes. The picture was well known and hung in the private dining room of one of the most luxurious high-roller suites at the Bellagio, which is not open to the public. A suite allocated for the casino's top customers. I placed a couple calls. I have contacts in Las Vegas, and they owe me favors. A guy who works in casino security confirmed it to me. Richard Hale was the registered owner of the unit. He was there for a week hosting a group of clients, including 4 women. My girlfriend, Rachel, was one of them. This wasn't a girls' trip. It was a paid party. She wasn't on vacation with her friends. She served as an accessory for a wealthy married man and his business associates. The entire journey, the secrecy, the blocking, it was all a ruse for a life she was leading that I had no part in. The last piece of the puzzle was the most painful. In one of Sophie's films, I noticed Rachel in the background. She was laughing, holding a drink, and speaking to a male. I couldn't see his face properly, but something about him felt familiar. I extracted the audio, cleaned it up, then processed it using a voice analysis tool. It was a long shot, but I needed to know. The software matched the vocal pattern to a sample from my own database. Her ex-fiancé, Andrew, was the man whose voice she heard. The man she had told me she despises. The man she said had cheated on her and destroyed her heart. He was one of Richard Hale's clients. The whole thing was a lie. A complicated, multi-layered, and extremely offensive deception. She hadn't just taken a trip without me. She had taken a trip to be with another man, which had been paid for by another man, all while claiming to be with her pals. My plan of action was clear. This was not a circumstance that required a discussion. It necessitated a consequence, a public, unmistakable, and life-altering one. I began with Eleanor, Richard Hale's wife. I checked her background. She was a respected pediatrician, a mother, and a woman who appeared to have no idea what her husband was doing on business travels. I didn't contact her personally. That wasn't my place. But I produced a file, a nice digital bundle comprising the private jet's trip itinerary, hotel suite registration, and social media images, including those of her husband with Veronica. I forwarded the file to a reputable divorce attorney in her city, along with an anonymous note. You might want to show this to your client, Eleanor Hale. It appears that her husband's business excursions are more eventful than she realizes. Then I dealt with Andrew, the ex-fiancé. He was a real estate developer. According to public documents, he was also involved in a contentious commercial dispute with his former partners. I have a pal who is an investigative journalist. I provided him an anonymous report about a real estate developer who pays for his luxury lifestyle and travels to Las Vegas with other people's money. I supplied Andrew's name and some information about his business dealings, which were easy to locate if you knew where to search. Finally, I prepared for Rachel's homecoming. She was scheduled to land on Sunday afternoon. She had texted me from a friend's phone a few days prior. A quick, happy message. I'm having so much fun. Cannot wait to see you. Pick me up at 3 p.m. on Sunday. I will unlock you once I am on the plane. I responded with a simple, okay. She expected me. She anticipated a hug, a kiss, and a peaceful drive home during which she would tell me a succession of well-selected anecdotes about her trip. She had no idea what was waiting for her. I found the one person who had a better reason to be at that airport than I had. It took 2 days of hard investigation, but I discovered her, Andrew's live-in girlfriend and ex-fiancée. Her name is Serena. She is a schoolteacher who had no idea her boyfriend was in Las Vegas. He had informed her that he was at a wellness retreat in Arizona without mobile service. I called her. I've never had to make a more difficult decision. I informed her who I was and what I'd discovered. I emailed her the evidence, including the audio file, photos, and hotel information. She remained silent for a long time. Then she started crying. But after the tears came the wrath, a cold, hard anger that mirrored mine. I informed her of Rachel's flight. I told her what time she was landing and made her a proposition. She expects me to be there, I said, but I believe she should see you first. Serena agreed without hesitation. So, the stage is set. The actors are in position. Rachel's flight is set to land in 24 hours. She anticipates a welcome home party. She had no notion that she is about to stroll into a funeral, her own. Update 2. The events of the last few days have been more chaotic and fulfilling than I could have anticipated. The airport was more than just a conflict. It was a detonation. And I was the one with the trigger, miles away. I wasn't at the airport on Sunday. I was at home, watching the scenario on a live feed from a private security contractor I'd hired. He was posing as a limo driver, holding a sign with a different name, and his phone camera was streaming directly to my laptop. Rachel's flight arrived on time. I watched as she and her 3 pals exited the gate and entered the baggage claim area. They were tanned, laughing, and filled with shopping bags. Rachel was on the phone, with a large smile on her face. She was probably messaging me to let me know she was there and that I should be waiting at the curb. Serena entered through the main doors into the arrivals hall, and I noticed her. She stood there, calm and cool, holding a large, nicely produced poster board. On the board was a crystal-clear, high-resolution photo that I had obtained from my casino contact. It was a photo of Rachel and Andrew sitting at a blackjack table in the high roller lounge, his arm wrapped around her. Rachel noticed Serena first. Her smile froze, her face turned pallid. She froze in her tracks. Her pals, still chatting, ran into her. They followed her eyes, first to Serena and then to the poster she was carrying. The laughs stopped. Serena didn't yell. She didn't yell. She just stood there and let the photo speak for itself. The arrivals area of a big airport is a bustling location, but a small bubble of silence and high drama formed around them. People stopped, stared, and took out their phones. Rachel attempted to recuperate. She started walking away, pretending she didn't recognize Serena. But Serena was prepared. She took a step forward, her voice clear and steady, audible to everyone around them. Andrew sends his apologies, Serena stated. He could not be here to welcome you home himself. He is a little busy explaining this picture to me. Rachel's pals looked at her with a mixture of shock and dread. They had taken part in the deception and were now stuck in the bomb radius. At that same moment, a man in a clean suit walked forward. He was the process server I'd hired. He walked straight up to Rachel. "Rachel Miller?" he inquired, his tone professional and loud. She simply nodded, absolutely stunned. "You have been served," he explained, handing her a large legal envelope. That envelope included a legal eviction notice. She had 30 days to remove her items from my property. A restraining order was also included, prohibiting her from contacting me or approaching my home or business within 500 feet. The combination of public humiliation and court documentation proved too much. Rachel just crumpled. She dropped her luggage, covered her face with her hands, and began sobbing. Her pals didn't rush to console her. They grabbed their own luggage and dispersed through the crowd like rats escaping a dying ship. They wanted nothing to do with the mess they had contributed to create. My security contractor's camera caught the entire affair. The gorgeous, confident woman who had barred me from her life only 5 days before was now sitting on the floor of an airport, surrounded by her expensive shopping bags, completely alone. Since then, the fallout has been rapid and broad. Eleanor, Richard Hale's wife, wasted no time. The day after I sent the papers to her lawyer, she filed for divorce. She also liquidated a major chunk of their joint assets and placed the funds in a trust for her children, as her prenuptial agreement enabled her to do in the event of infidelity. Richard is going through a messy, expensive, and public divorce. His employer is also apparently reviewing his position, as the scandal does not reflect well on their family-oriented image. Veronica, the trip's leader, has been named in the divorce proceedings. Andrew, the ex-fiancé, is also in deep danger. The journalist I tipped off published an article regarding his unscrupulous business dealings. His partners are suing him, and his reputation is ruined. Serena has left him and, with my assistance, is planning her own legal action against him for financial damages. And Rachel's life is a smoldering crater. She has no partner or home, and her friends have abandoned her. She had to phone her parents to come pick her up from the airport. I can only image the discourse. She now resides in their spare bedroom, a 30-year-old lady whose entire life has been reset to zero. She has attempted to contact me, of course. She's used disposable phones, new email accounts, and everything. I've not reacted. My lawyer has issued her a cease and desist letter, reminding her of the restraining order. Her pals have also attempted to reach out, each with their own feeble attempt at damage control. They've all said they had no idea what was going on, and Rachel had lied to them. I have not replied to them either. They are irrelevant. I spent the week following her return gradually removing her from my life. A professional moving company packaged her possessions and delivered them to her parents' address. I changed my telephone number. I have cleaned up my social media. To her and the world she lives in, I've become a ghost. She assumed she was playing a game. She believed she could have it all, the stability I offered and the thrill of a secret existence. She didn't comprehend that there are no games in my universe. There are just facts, proof, and consequences. She issued me a 5-day blackout. I've given her a lifetime of it. Final update. It's been 6 months since the airport greeting. The dust has not just settled, it has been cleaned away, leaving a clean slate. I'm writing this final post not to brag, but to wrap up this chapter of my life and chronicle the quiet consequences of a series of extremely loud mistakes. My life has progressed in unexpected ways. After the initial satisfaction of the payback had worn off, I was left with a feeling of emptiness. I'd won, but it felt hollow. I had spent so much of my life searching for falsehood in others that I had forgotten how to look for the positive. Serena, Andrew's ex-girlfriend, was the one who helped me make that shift. We kept in touch following the airport event. We were two people who had been betrayed by the same deception, and we found weird consolation in our common trauma. We started with coffee and then dinner. We discussed everything but what had transpired. We discussed about work, families, and dreams. I discovered a woman who was nice, witty, and quite strong. We are now dating. It's slow, it is cautious, and it is based on complete honesty. It is the most authentic thing in my life. However, the lives of those who cause such havoc have reached their own appropriate conclusions. Richard Hale's divorce was finalized. It was horrible. Eleanor, armed with the proof I presented, demanded all of her legal rights. He lost his home, a large chunk of his fortune, and his job at the investment firm. His reputation has been shattered. Veronica, who was mentioned in the divorce, is now a social outcast. The wealthy men she used to hang around with now regard her as a liability. Andrew's legal difficulties have only worsened. The article concerning his business methods prompted an official probe. He is facing many lawsuits and even criminal accusations. He's lost everything. And Rachel's narrative is the quietest, and in some ways the saddest. After months of living with her parents, she found a new job and moved into a tiny apartment. She is starting afresh, but she is doing so alone. Her buddies never returned. Her reputation has never returned. I had one last communication from her roughly 2 months ago. My lawyer forwarded a letter to me. It was a long, handwritten apology. She didn't make excuses. She did not ask for another chance. She just owned it. She described the public humiliation at the airport as the worst day of her life, but it was also the day she recognized herself for who she was, someone who valued the attention of others over the love of one. She stated that she was in therapy and aspired to one day be someone she could be proud of. She closed the letter by stating that she did not expect forgiveness, but was deeply sorry for the grief she had caused me. I read the letter and for the first time, I felt neither rage nor satisfaction. I simply felt a sense of closure. I feel her apologies were genuine. However, I feel that once something is broken, it cannot be repaired. My retaliation was more than just exposing a lie. It was about pushing a group of people who had lived in an illusionary environment to confront an indisputable truth. The airport was a stage, and everyone was ordered to remove their masks. What was left was not attractive. I don't think about them anymore. My life is complete. I have a partner I trust, a business I am proud of, and a sense of calm that I have not felt in years. I still see the world in layers, but I'm better at recognizing the beautiful with the negative. Rachel believed she could block me out for 5 days. She had no idea that by doing so, she was providing me the opportunity to construct a new firewall that would safeguard my life from her kind of mayhem indefinitely. Behind that wall, everything is calm, everything is safe. My family said, "Don't guilt us," and chose a concert over my big night. Now I'm living my best life, knowing they'll never reach me. My name is Paul. I'm 27 years old and I've always played a supporting role in my family's story. I'm the quiet one, the responsible one. The one who never causes trouble but doesn't appear to deserve any credit. My parents and my younger brother Caleb had a habit of hovering around each other, noisy, demanding, and continually expecting me to take whatever position they assigned me. I used to convince myself I didn't mind because being overlooked allowed me to avoid the turmoil. However, being invisible in your own home eats away at you until it becomes all you think about. Caleb was always the favored child. He's 2 years younger, yet the moment he booted a soccer ball, he became the star. My parents attended all of his games, screamed from the sidelines, and threw celebrations for his accomplishments. When I returned home with good grades, they'd nod and say, "That's expected." When Caleb scored a goal, even if his team lost, it seemed like a celebration. The birthdays were the same. His would be a parade of balloons, cakes, and extravagant gifts. Mine were usually meals at home and possibly a sweater I did not want. It was not a shortage of things that hurt. It sent the notion that my efforts were ordinary, and his were outstanding. I attempted to play it off. I tried to be supportive. I did not want to be the jealous brother. But within, I felt a faint sorrow every time they brushed me aside. Nonetheless, I kept pushing myself through college, internships, and sleepless evenings working on projects that no one in my family ever inquired about. Caleb partied his way through university, whilst I worked hard. Even though they didn't notice, I knew it would be important one day. That day came when I received a nomination for an award in my field. It wasn't a little recognition either. It was the type of honor that could shift the course of my career. Months of hard effort, late nights, and sacrifices had culminated in this moment. For once, something significant had my name on it, and I wanted my family to be present. Against my better judgment, I reached for my phone and entered a message into the family group chat. "I'm getting an award tonight. It would be very appreciated if you arrived." I hesitated before pushing send, part of me knowing how this would end, but also hoping that they might surprise me. The typing bubble appeared nearly instantly. It was Caleb. He wrote, "We're going to a concert instead." Just like that. There was no hesitancy, no thought, and no question regarding the nature of the prize. A concert. Some band he probably won't remember in a month. My mother spoke up before I could even grasp how hurtful that was. "Don't guilt us," she typed, as if my request was a burden, as if I was forcing them to choose between breathing and suffocating. I focused on the TV, my chest constricting. I felt a surge of heat travel up my neck. I wanted to shout, to ask why it was always like this, why I didn't matter. Instead, I simply typed back 2 words. "All right." And I intended it. Not in the way they expected, and not in the way that said I would accept being sidelined again. Something within of me shifted in that instant. I wasn't a child anymore, hoping for their approval. I wasn't waiting for their applause or cheers. Who night, I'd stand in front of a throng who recognized me and acknowledged what I'd accomplished. And my family would be exactly where they wanted to be. What none of them realized was that this awards presentation was not a quiet backstage affair. It was supposed to be broadcast live, not just online, but on television, cameras, interviews, and the works. My name would be spoken, my face on the screen, and my narrative conveyed. And when the spotlight finally found me, the individuals who had spent years making me feel invisible would be forced to see me with everyone else. But before that time came, I had to deal with the usual sting of disappointment. I recall pacing my small apartment that afternoon, thinking about what I'd answer if they asked why I didn't push them harder to come. Should I guilt them again? Should I describe how much it meant to me? Should I let the silence do the talking? My mind went in circles. And yet, behind it all, there was a peculiar serenity, as if I was standing on the verge of something greater than the years of negligence that had passed. The prize was one thing, but the real change was occurring within me. For once I wasn't simply surviving their absence. I let it fuel me. Every contemptuous comment, every overlooked milestone, and every shrug at my accomplishment had all led up to this moment. Even though they had no known, I had already begun scripting the next chapter in our family's story. My phone buzzed again that evening, as I slipped into the outfit I'd purchased months before with money I had saved. Caleb had sent a picture of himself and his companions smiling outside the concert venue, holding drinks with the phrase, "Best night ever." Mom loved the message with a heart. Dad said, "Enjoy it, you deserve it." My hand clenched on the phone. Deserve. The word echoed in my mind. Caleb appeared to deserve everything, and I was supposed to just nod along. I put down the phone, took a deep breath, and walked out the door. I didn't realize it at the time, but by the end of the night, the image on their screens would have left them speechless in ways they had never been before. I sat in the back of the cab on the way to the ceremony, peering out at the city lights that blurred past the window. The world outside appeared alive, pulsating with energy, as if it were in tune with me for once. But inside, I felt heavy. The image of that group chat kept playing in my head. Caleb laughing at his concert, Mom cheering him on, and Dad piping in with words he hadn't used for me in years. That word deserve was repeated over and over like a drumbeat I couldn't shake. It wasn't new. It was not even unexpected. To be honest, I had seen it coming since I was a child. My parents had this habit of comparing everything I did to Caleb, and I constantly came up short. When I received a college scholarship, they remarked, "That's great, Paul, but don't brag. Your brother is still figuring things out." When Caleb joined a minor league team, they treated him as if he had just signed with Barcelona. I recall a Christmas that occurred many years ago. I'd saved up my allowance and part-time job money to get Dad a good watch, which I knew he'd been wanting. When he opened it, he smiled nicely and said, "Thanks, son," before setting it aside. Later that night, Caleb gave him a cheap gas station keychain with a soccer ball charm. And Dad chuckled, clipped it on his keys, and exclaimed, "Now this is special." Everyone applauded and teased Caleb for his thoughtfulness. I sat there calmly, suppressing the sting in my throat. The tendency only worsened as we became older. Caleb crashed his car once after a night out. My parents rushed to console him, bought him a newer model, and said, "Don't be too hard on yourself, mistakes happen." When my car broke down from wear and tear because I couldn't afford a replacement, Dad shook his head and said, "You should have planned better, Paul." No sympathy, no help, just disappointment. Nonetheless, I continued hoping that one day they'd notice me. That one day they'd sit in the audience, clapping till their hands ached, smiling as if they were proud of me. That's why the award was important. It wasn't just recognition from strangers, it proved that my life, my decisions, and my hard work were worthwhile. Proof that I was not the darkness they portrayed me to be. But when I thought about it, I understood they didn't want to see it. They wouldn't do it, not because they couldn't. Caleb's radiance was simpler to soak in. He was noisy, charismatic, and messy in an acceptable way. I was quiet and steady, a reminder of the duty they refused to face. That week before the wedding, I tried to test the waters. I mentioned the nomination to Mom over the phone. She hummed distractedly and inquired if I had noticed Caleb's new haircut. I informed Dad that the award was from one of the largest organizations in my field. He nodded and continued. "That's great, but have you considered moving back closer to home? Caleb could use your assistance with some bills." It seemed like every topic circled back to him. The final straw before the ceremony came when I went home a month earlier. I hadn't been in a while, so I figured we'd sit down and talk. Instead, I entered the living room and discovered the mantel covered in Caleb's trophies, medals, framed photos, soccer tournaments, birthdays, and other milestones. My own graduation photo was no longer there. When I asked Mom about it, she simply answered, "Oh, we had to make room. It's in the drawer." The drawer. Like my entire existence might be hidden away and forgotten. So, when I saw their comments in the group chat that night, I knew I had been holding onto a delusion. They were not arriving. They never would. The ceremony was not for them. That was for me. And yet, a cruel part of me wished they could see. Not simply hearing about it afterward. Not just blow it off when I mentioned it months later, but see it firsthand, with no way out. The cab arrived at the location, and I stepped out into a haze of light and noise. Reporters stood by the entrance, cameras flashing, as the nominees walked the carpet. My stomach twisted. This was real. This was my moment. As I walked forward, fixing my tie, I could almost hear Caleb's voice taunting me. "Don't guilt us." I could hear Mom add, "We're busy." And behind it all, Dad's word, "deserve." That term didn't sting as much anymore. Because tonight I demonstrated precisely what I deserved. But the building tension wasn't just because they didn't show up. Something else was stirring within me. Anger, pride, and a quiet plan formed in the back of my mind. I didn't know how yet. But I wasn't going to let this be another time they passed over. This time, they couldn't look away. And the timing couldn't have been better. Because I had no idea until I arrived that the organizers had a surprise in store. The awards event was not merely carried on local television. It aired nationally. My name, face and narrative were going to receive far more attention than I could have imagined. I smiled to myself, despite the agony in my chest. For years I was pushed aside, minimized, and treated as if I didn't matter. Tonight, everything would change. Not because they wanted it to, but because they didn't have another option. And while I stood in line waiting to check in, I took out my phone once more. I stared at the family group chat, at Caleb's concert photo, Mom's heartfelt reaction, and Dad's words. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. Part of me wanted to send them one last message, a last opportunity, something as simple as, "It's being televised." But then I stopped. Allow them to learn in the same way that the rest of the country would. I returned the phone to my pocket, straightened my shoulders, and walked inside. The ceremony had a weird energy, almost dreamy. I had attended events previously, but nothing like this. Cameras raking through the throng, flashes of light, people in sharp suits and gorgeous gowns, everyone vibrating with excitement. As I checked in, they handed me a tiny envelope containing my seat number and a badge with my name in bold lettering. Paul Harrison is a nominee. I turned it over in my palms, allowing the weight to soak in. I should have felt ecstatic, but something gnawed at me. That gnawing became a sharp twist when I looked at my phone again shortly before the ceremony began. Notifications popped up in the family group chat. Caleb had posted a series of photos at the concert, showing him beaming with his arm around his companions while clutching drinks and plastic cups. Another photograph of the stage lights, another photo of him smiling with a band member who he undoubtedly asked for a selfie with. He titled one, "Best Night of My Life." I scrolled on. Mom wrote, "So proud of you, sweetheart," followed by applauding emojis. Dad went on, "You earned this, son, nothing like making memories." That was the moment. That was the knife. Not only did they not show up for me, but they were celebrating Caleb's night, as if it were a major accomplishment. I sat there in my fitted suit, months of preparation ready to pay off on one of the most significant nights of my life, and my own parents couldn't be bothered to notice. Worse, they were expressing their pride in him at a random concert, which was transitory. My chest tightened. I remembered every minor detail. Every instant I brushed it off. My graduation picture is packed in a drawer. The cheap keychain was treated as if it were a treasure, whereas my carefully chosen gift was ignored. When I told Dad I had gotten my first job out of college, he hardly looked up from the television before asking if Caleb needed assistance with rent. I had gently eaten it all, hoping that one day it would be different. But staring at those messages made me grasp the reality. It wasn't going to be different. The betrayal was not limited to their absence. It was in the manner they emphasized that no matter what I did, I would never be enough. Not compared to him. They didn't simply overlook me. They consciously opted to channel their pride, affection, and words of encouragement elsewhere. And this wasn't childhood anymore. I was not a youngster looking for approval. I was a man sitting in a room full of people who genuinely valued what I had accomplished, while my family cheered from the sidelines of someone else's life. The event began with lights darkening and music increasing. My focus should have been on the stage, the speakers, and the potential of hearing my name called, but all I could see was the group chat. My brother's grin and my parents' applause. Not for me, but for him. My hands trembled slightly as I placed the phone face down on my leg. I took a breath, but it did not settle me down. The sting developed into a burn, which evolved into something sharper. My trust in them, what little I had left, had vanished. That night, something inside me shifted abruptly and permanently. I wasn't simply disappointed anymore. I was finished. It was almost poetic in a horrible sense. At the exact time I was about to be seen by the world, the people who should have been my first and loudest supporters proved once more that they would never be. The contrast was terrible. It was like watching two versions of my existence collide. The one in which I was invisible at home and finally recognized outside of it. I didn't realize it at the time, but seeing my family shower Caleb with pride while I sat alone in that ballroom was the breaking point. I could never cross that emotional line again. From that moment forward, everything I did, planned, and anticipated was no longer about obtaining their approval. It was about something completely different. And as the announcer moved onto the stage, the cameras swept across the audience. I slumped back in my chair, my gaze locked on the dazzling lights overhead. My jaw stiffened, and a peculiar peace came over me. If they didn't want to see me, they would be forced to. The ceremony went like a dream, but within, I was drowning. I sat in a room full of strangers applauding speeches, the clink of glasses reverberating, and I felt torn in two. On the outside, I smiled as the cameras panned past, cheered politely for other victors, and nodded to the conversations going on around me. On the inside, I was spiraling. They then called my name. Yes, this is my name. I came onto the stage and took the prize with firm hands and a clear voice, yet I could barely hear myself. I recall flashes, the dazzling lights, the weight of the trophy in my hand, and the audience rising in a standing ovation. I must have said something comprehensible, because later others complimented me on how motivating my remarks were. However, my thoughts were elsewhere at the time. It was not based on the applause in front of me. It was the silence behind me, the absence of the only people who were supposed to be there. As I stood there holding that prize, a piece of myself broke off, like a rope snapping after years of tension. The little kid who wanted his parents to tell him, "We're proud of you," died softly on stage. The night ended with a celebration. There were photographs, interviews, and new contacts. Everyone smiled, shook my hand, and told me I had a bright future. However, when I returned to my flat, the walls were colder than ever. I placed the trophy on my desk and simply stared at it. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like ash in my mouth. I opened my phone. Of course, the family discussion remained active. Caleb had posted additional concert recordings, and my parents were fawning over them, with Dad remarking, "Wish we could do nights like this more often." I clicked and scrolled, hoping to see even a fleeting mention of me. A query regarding how my evening went. A basic good luck message. There was nothing, not a word. I laid back on the couch, phone facing down, and stared at the ceiling. My chest felt hollow, as if the air had been pulled out of me. It struck me then. I was on my own. Not only physically, but emotionally. They'd never be the family I envisioned. That was my rock bottom. I did not cry. Not that night. It wasn't sad anymore. It was a heavier, more resigned silence, the kind that occurs when you finally stop disputing with reality. In that silence, something else sparked. Something sharper. I reflected on all the times I had twisted myself into knots attempting to gain their acceptance. During late-night phone calls, I would downplay my own accomplishments so Caleb wouldn't feel overshadowed. On weekends, I'd help Dad with housework while Caleb went out to parties, only to be admonished later that, "Your brother has so much on his plate, you should be more supportive." Birthdays, graduations, job offers, moments when I should have been celebrated, but I was constantly encouraged to keep it quiet and not make it about me. Everything replayed in my thoughts like a horrible highlight reel. Then came a conclusion that shocked me to the core. I'd squandered years begging for morsels of validation that would never arrive. That was when the planning began. Not consciously at first, but quietly, as if seeds were sowed in the dark. I hadn't considered how I could exact revenge. Not yet. It began simply. I wondered how I could step away. How do I create something so far beyond them that they can never touch it, reduce it, or store it in a drawer? The answer was not immediate. It was not even clear. But the transition had begun. I could feel it when I stared at the trophy on my desk. Not as a reward, but as a reminder. A reminder that I did not need them to make myself noticeable. That I could be seen, whether they wanted to admit it or not. The next few weeks were some of the most difficult of my life. Every family call I ignored. Every group chat notice I turned off. It was like pulling muscle from bone. I'd been conditioned for years to want their approval, so turning away felt strange and terrible. But every time I reached for my phone to react, I told myself to stop. They did not notice. Not really. Mom texted a few casual messages, usually regarding Caleb's games. Dad forwarded items he believed I'd find useful, but never inquired about my work. Caleb flooded the chat with photographs of his night outs, new attire, and weird quips. No one asked how I was doing. Nobody mentioned the award. And in that blank, in that oppressive stillness, I began to construct. I immersed myself in work, not as an escape, but as fuel. I began attending meetings that I had previously avoided scheduling. I approached mentors whom I had previously avoided engaging. I agreed to opportunities that worried me. Every night I reminded myself, this is for me, not them. But deep inside, another voice whispered, one day they'll see. One day they won't be able to ignore you. That concept terrified me at first because it sounded harsh and spiteful. But the longer I sat with it, the more it seemed like clarity. I wasn't planning their collapse. Not then. But I was done shielding them from the reality. I'm done allowing their carelessness to define me. Done pretending that their preference didn't matter. Even though I couldn't see the whole picture yet, I knew one thing for certain. When the time came, I would not let it pass silently. The alteration in me did not occur overnight. It was mild, almost imperceptible at first. However, in the weeks and months after the award, I began to notice the changes stacking up like bricks, each one forming a wall between the old me, who lived for scraps of acknowledgement from my family, and the new me, who no longer need them. It began with opportunities that poured in following the wedding. The award had brought my name to the forefront, and doors that had previously been bolted shut broke open. Companies reached out. People I liked approached me about collaborating, and mentors who had previously overlooked me called me personally. At first I felt like an imposter, as if I didn't belong in these conversations. But slowly, I discovered something I'd never allowed myself to believe. I'd earned everything. I took on projects that worried me, projects I would have previously avoided for fear of failing and hearing my family say, "See, you're not cut out for this." But without their voices in my ear, I felt lighter. And my success was more than just a professional victory. It demonstrated to myself that I didn't need their approval to be successful. My life began to shift in ways they could not predict. I moved to a better apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the downtown skyline. I began dressing differently, sharper suits, clothing that indicated the guy I was becoming rather than the quiet shadow I had previously been. My confidence grew, and people noticed. Strangers at networking events gravitated towards me. Colleagues looked to me for leadership, and mentors I formerly looked up to began treating me as an equal. Meanwhile, nothing changed in my family's environment. Caleb remained the focus of their attention, posting images of night outs and soccer games. Mom and Dad cheered him on with the same old fervor, as if each action was new. But from my new vantage point, things appeared different. For the first time I recognized it clearly. Not as a reflection of my inadequacy, but of their limitations. They had no idea how to value anything other than the simple, familiar glow Caleb supplied. I stopped craving their attention, and instead began to embrace a new type of power. Invisibility by choice. They didn't inquire about my life, therefore, I didn't elaborate. When Mom called, I kept our chat nice but brief. When Dad asked whether I could help your brother financially, apparently Caleb was behind on rent again. I simply replied, "I can't," and left it at that. For once, I didn't tie myself up in knots attempting to justify my boundaries. I didn't over-explain or apologize. I just let the stillness hang. They didn't press very hard. I believe they felt I was still quietly trudging along, the same dependable Paul who was always available when they needed something. They didn't realize how much had changed. And a part of me took quiet delight in the idea that I was creating something far larger than they could imagine right in front of their eyes. When you cease limiting yourself, success tends to multiply. Within a year, I had gained more than just respect in my area. People were starting to recognize my name. Invitations to speak at conferences poured in. There were articles written regarding the work I was doing. I was even requested to participate on panels alongside folks I had previously studied with in school. Every time I saw my name in print or was granted a microphone, I felt the weight of years of anonymity lifted. However, in the quiet moments, when the acclaim died down, and I was alone in my apartment, I couldn't help but think of them. Not with longing, but with detached interest. What would they say if they knew? Will they finally see me, or will they try to make it about Caleb? The thought did not hurt as much as it did before. Now it only fuels me. The tipping point came when I was asked to a national event that was larger than the awards ceremony, and anything I'd done previously. A televised gala, honoring inventors and leaders from several industries. When I received the invitation, I laughed as I grasped the embossed envelope. Not because it was hilarious, but because it seemed like fate. I understood right away that this was it, a moment you couldn't avoid. The kind of illumination that can reach even the most difficult corners. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to simply step into the spotlight. I was going to own it. Nonetheless, I stayed quiet. I didn't mention it to my relatives. I didn't hint at the magnitude of what was coming. Let them continue to cheer Caleb on. Allow them to continue assuming I was just managing. When the night came, they'd find out alongside everyone else. And that's when I understood I wasn't simply climbing. I was prepared. Slowly, silently, I was laying the groundwork for something greater than achievement. Something that went beyond proving oneself. Because one day, they won't only have to acknowledge me, they'd have to address their actions, the years they'd spent neglecting, dismissing, and underestimating me. And when that day arrived, I wasn't sure I needed their apologies. What I wanted was for them to experience what I had, the pain of being invisible, the empty anguish of understanding you'd missed something significant. The invitation to the National Gala sat on my desk for weeks, its embossed letters catching the sun every time I walked by. I'd give it a casual glance, but within I could feel a hum of electricity. This wasn't your typical award or speaking occasion. This was the kind of platform that might solidify my place in the public eye, a spotlight so large and dazzling that even individuals who had spent their entire lives refusing to look at me would be forced to do so. However, the true setup for what was to come did not take place on the night of the gala. It started months ago, when the prospects from my accolades grew into something far bigger than I could have dreamed. One of the firms I collaborated with following my first major recognition was a media conglomerate with links in TV, print, and online. At start, it was simply a collaboration. I'd help them with their projects and offer my knowledge in exchange for visibility. But as time passed, I understood they weren't only interested in what I could offer. They were intrigued in my story, perspective, and ability to connect with an audience. It was unusual to go from being disregarded by my own family to suddenly being sought after by influential strangers. I recall sitting in a glass-walled office one afternoon, the city stretching behind me, when one of the executives leaned over and said, "Paul, people don't just respect your work. They relate to you, which is unusual. Have you considered what you could do with a larger platform?" That sentence stayed with me. A larger platform. Not only recognition in my field, but something beyond. Something public. Something apparent. And for the first time, I realized how years of quiet and dismissal could become fuel. If I leaned into it, if I told the world my tale, others could recognize themselves in me. Over the next 3 months, I began taking interviews for podcasts, magazines, and panels. At first, I kept my answers entirely business, discussing my career, projects, and aspirations. But gradually, I started to open up. I discussed resilience, being underestimated, and working in silence when no one believes in you. I didn't name my family, but I didn't have to. The message resonated on its own. The response stunned me. People inundated my email with messages, and I felt invisible too. "Thank you for expressing what so many of us have experienced. You gave me hope." It was humiliating, but also clarifying. I wasn't just advancing for myself anymore. My narrative, my survival in the shadows, helped others find their voices. And as I got more visible, I felt more powerful. Meanwhile, my family remained unaware. Calls continued to come in about Caleb, his soccer league, his new girlfriend, and his plans that never seemed to materialize. When Dad inquired if I was still doing the same work, I almost laughed. He had no idea I had been promoted twice, or that my name had been featured in big media. Mom complained that I didn't make enough visits, and that Caleb missed me. Every talk was a rehash of the same script. Their universe was too little to realize what I was quietly creating outside of them. And I let them remain blind. I did not correct them, gloat, or hint. Silence became my weapon. Then came the meeting, which changed everything. The organizers of the National Gala requested me not only to attend, but also to receive a unique recognition, a Lifetime Achievement Award, notwithstanding my age, for my pioneering work in the sector. I almost laughed as I read the email. Lifetime Achievement. At 27. The magnitude was ludicrous, yet it was genuine, and it would be televised live across the country. When I entered the gala planning session, I anticipated to talk about logistics, time slots, speeches, and costumes. What I didn't expect was for the director to lean across the table and say, "We'd like to feature your story as part of the televised broadcast. Not just your work, but your journey. We think people need to hear it." My chest tightened. For a brief moment, I imagined Caleb and my parents sitting at home, perhaps surfing through channels and stumbling onto me on their television screens. Hearing my experience, not as a family member to disregard, but as a narrative delivered to the entire country. Naturally, I agreed. But internally, I understood what this meant. The setup was completed. All the years of being minimized, all the invisible scars, all the swallowed words, they were about to be spoken out, framed in a way that no one could miss. The irony was almost too acute. My relatives had accused me of making them feel guilty for begging to be seen. They were going to hear the truth, whether they wanted it or not. They couldn't ignore it because it was delivered in a broadcast rather than a private plea. And while I had no idea how they'd react, I knew one thing for certain. At the end of the night, the balance of power between us would never be the same. The night of the gala arrived with a weight pressing against your ribs. I stood in front of the mirror in my hotel room, fixing the cuffs on my suit. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was dressing up to impress others. Not my parents. Not Caleb. Not even the audience I was about to address. I was doing this for me, and in a way, for the younger version of myself who had sat silently at dinner tables while everyone else hailed Caleb's latest accomplishment. The setting was stunning, a cathedral of lights and silk. Cameras perched like hawks, ready to swoop. As I came down the red carpet, reporters leaned closer with their microphones, calling my name. I responded quietly and confidently, never revealing that my thoughts was elsewhere, half on the stage I was about to walk upon, partly on the living room I imagined at home. I could picture the TV flickering and my parents relaxing into the couch after a long day. Caleb sprawled with his phone in hand, and they were all expecting another average evening. And suddenly my face would take up the entire screen. The program flowed like a well-rehearsed play. Speeches, performances, and applause in the appropriate places. I waited, each minute increasing, the stress within me. When my category finally arrived, the announcer's voice echoed around the hall, describing my accomplishments, projects, and rise from obscurity. I could feel the cameras focusing on me and the heat of the lights pressing against my flesh. My heart raced, not from nerves, but from eagerness. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer finished, "please welcome tonight's honoree, Paul Harrison." As I came on stage, the applause rose like a tsunami. My shoes clicked on the glossy floor, each step heavier than the last, as if I were marching not just into the spotlight, but also into a confrontation. The presenter handed me the prize, which was sleek and sparkling. I shook his hand, smiled, and then turned to face the throng. 1,000 eyes peered up at me, and millions more through the cameras. The three faces I'd waited my entire life to see were somewhere among them, possibly at that same moment. I leaned into the microphone, my voice remained steady. "Thank you," I said, pausing to let the atmosphere settle. "This honor means more to me than just appreciation for my efforts. It symbolizes something deeper, what it means to be seen. After years of being invisible, I was finally seen." A quiet descended. My words were not technical or about my field. They were personal, deliberate. I grew up in a family that gave selective attention, where achievements were compared, measured, and frequently discarded. For years, I thought I wasn't good enough, that no matter how hard I worked, it would never be appreciated. I assumed invisibility was my fate. I let it dangle in the air. I did not give Caleb a name. I didn't bring up my parents explicitly. But the weight of my story dominated the room. "But invisibility," I added, "may be an effective instructor. It forces you to work in silence, to establish roots strong enough to withstand when no one is looking. It teaches you resilience. And when the time comes, when the light finally finds you, you're prepared to stand strong in it." The crowd changed. Some people nodded. Others leaned forwards. I could sense them connecting. I stand here tonight not because of what I've done, but because of what I've been through. Anyone who has ever been overlooked, rejected, or told they don't deserve to be recognized, please know that you do. You always did. And your time will come. Applause erupted, booming like thunder. The cameras flashed, but I didn't hear the audience in front of me. First, imagined the astonished expressions, the tightening jaws, the understanding that the son and sibling they'd overlooked was now speaking to an entire nation. The speech was not about vengeance in the loudest, most violent sense. It was quiet, measured, and almost gentle. But that's what intensified the hurt. I had not reacted aggressively. I had not begged. I had simply stated the truth, which they had spent years denying, and delivered it in a way that millions of people appreciated. As I stepped off the platform, prize in hand, I realized the job was done. The retaliation did not consist of directly humiliating them. It was about ensuring that when they stared at that screen, they couldn't escape reality. I had risen without, above, and beyond them, yet they had missed it. My phone was buzzing all night after the gala. Messages flooded in from coworkers, mentors, and even strangers who had seen the show. People told me my remarks had impacted them and that they recognized themselves in my narrative. Some described me as brave, while others simply said, "Thank you." For the first time in my life, I felt the full weight of being seen. And it wasn't simply recognition, it was resonance. Among the scores of bright notifications, 3 stood out. The family group chat. Initially, it was silent. I envisioned the astonishment in their living room when my face came on national television, uttering truths they'd been ignoring for years. Finally, a message from Mom emerged. "Paul, why didn't you notify us about the major event?" I stared at it, allowing the words to soak in. "Not that we're proud of you. We are sorry we missed it. Just the same deflection and inability to accept responsibility, as if it was my fault for not pressing them to care." A second message arrived, this time from Dad. "You made us sound like bad parents on live TV. Do you understand what others will think?" I laughed. Not bitter or angry, just a little, unbelieving laugh. Even today, their first thought was to care about their look, how they were perceived, rather than what they had done. Then Caleb joined in. "Wow, brother. Don't you think this is a touch dramatic? You made it sound like we've ignored you your entire life." "Chill. It's not very profound." That was it. The final nail. I felt a strong clarity rush over me, almost peacefully. They had not changed. They never would. I didn't need them to. I did not respond to the group conversation. Instead, I entered 3 different messages. To Mom. For years I begged to be acknowledged. Last night I was. You had a chance. To Dad, you are correct. People will believe you were bad parents. That is because you were. And Caleb felt it was that deep. It always was. You simply never had to feel it. Then I silenced the conversation and put the phone down. For the first time I felt no shame, longing, or fury. I just felt liberated. Word circulated rapidly following the gala. Relatives who had rarely spoken to me before reached out to congratulate me and express their pride. Old instructors emailed, saying they saw me on TV and remembered the quiet youngster sitting in the back of the classroom. Even neighbors wrote comments, stating they had no clue I had accomplished so much. My parents couldn't avoid it. Their friends watched the broadcast. Their co-workers mentioned it. Even folks at church mentioned it. Their son could be seen everywhere they looked. They couldn't get away from the story of the son they'd disregarded. In the weeks that followed, they attempted to repair the rift. Mom called and left voicemails loaded with forced enthusiasm. Dad sent lengthy texts regarding misconceptions. Caleb, as expected, made a joke about it, claiming that I had exaggerated the negligence. But the difference now was simple. I did not respond. Silence born of decision, rather than loss. My life accelerated, new ventures, new platforms, new horizons, and each achievement increased the distance. The more the world cheered me, the smaller their justifications became. Months later, I returned home after another event and placed a second prize on the shelf next to the first. The city lights shone through my window, reflecting off the trophies and illuminating the room in gold. For a moment, I remembered the drawer at home, where Mom had stuffed my graduation photo to make room for Caleb's awards. I smiled. My achievements were no longer in a drawer, they were out in the open, for anyone to see. And the folks who had previously pushed me into the darkness were left blinking in the light, too late to shield their eyes. That was my vengeance. Not shouting, not vengeance in the classic sense, but living so fully and clearly that their years of negligence became their legacy rather than mine. I poured myself a glass of wine, stood by the window and let the silence of the city night envelope me. For the first time, I did not feel invisible. I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to clap. You're safe, comfortable, boring, my ex told me. I took her at her word, cut ties, and when she came back begging, I had already moved on. I, a 26-year-old male, was dating this girl Vanessa, a 24-year-old female, for about 2.5 years. I met her through my buddy's girlfriend at some rooftop party downtown. She was one of those girls who could walk into any room, and suddenly everyone was gravitating toward her. She was super outgoing, always down for whatever, the total opposite of my more chill personality. The first year was honestly pretty great. She got me out of my comfort zone, dragged me to concerts I never would have gone to, and made me try sushi. I still hate it, but whatever. I started going to yoga classes because she was into it. Yeah, I was that guy doing downward dog next to a bunch of soccer moms at 6 o'clock in the morning. Don't judge me. My dad, Robert, thought the whole thing was hilarious. Yoga? Really? What's next? Juice cleanses? He said he's been my best friend since my mom died when I was 12. He raised me alone, taught me plumbing, and never remarried because he said one woman trying to change him was enough for one lifetime. He has this way of saying exactly what everyone's thinking, but is too polite to say out loud. Around year 2, things started shifting. She'd disappear entire weekends for girls' trips that seemed to happen every other week. She started following a bunch of festival influencers on Instagram, always talking about this amazing party in Vegas or that underground music thing in Miami. She made friends with this crew who were all about that live your best life energy. You know the type. Always posting stories with those generic motivational quotes over sunset pics. The ringleader was her friend Tiffany. This woman was like the devil on Vanessa's shoulder, except she wasn't even subtle about it. Tiffany, 26, worked some vague marketing job that apparently paid enough for her to hit up every major festival on the West Coast. She had this way of making every conversation about how Vanessa was too young to be tied down and needed to have fun in her 20s. Dad met Tiffany exactly once at a barbecue and immediately sized her up. That one's trouble. She's got dead eyes and the personality of a motivational poster, he said. He wasn't wrong. Tiffany would text Vanessa constantly about parties, trips, and opportunities that were too good to pass up. Vanessa would get these messages, and suddenly our plans would change. Date night became, "Oh, Tiffany found this amazing warehouse party." Or, Tiffany's friend knows a promoter who can get us into this exclusive thing. The conversation that ended everything happened 4 months ago on a random Thursday night. We were eating the stir-fry I made. Yeah, I cook, fight me. I brought up my friend Marcus's wedding in October. Wanna be my +1? It's going to be pretty fun. Open bar, good music. Marcus has been planning this thing forever. She literally laughed. Not a cute giggle, but a full-on laugh, like I had just asked her to help me move a couch. October, dude. That's like 5 months away. Who knows where we'll be then? I put my fork down. What do you mean where we'll be? She took a sip of her drink, this $18 bottle she insisted we needed because it was organic or something, and looked at me like I was being dense. Albert, let's be real here. This is fun and all, but I'm not ready to settle down yet. I'm 24. I want to travel, meet new people, and experience things. I don't want to be tied down planning weddings and doing coupley stuff. So, what am I to you exactly? I asked. Here's where it gets good. She actually sat there and thought about it. Took another sip of her drink like she was contemplating world peace. You're comfortable, safe. You're like a security blanket. You're the kind of guy I'll come back to when I'm ready for all that serious stuff. But right now, you're kind of just a phase while I figure out what I really want. Just a phase. I felt like I was in that scene from Goodfellas where Henry's in the restaurant and everything goes quiet. A phase? Don't take it wrong. It's not you personally. I'm just not done having fun yet. When I'm like 28 or 29, I'll be ready for the whole settling down thing. Marriage, kids, whatever boring people do. And you assume I'll just wait around? I asked. She shrugged like we were talking about what to watch on Netflix. Why wouldn't you? We're good together. I just need to get this party phase out of my system first. You'll still be here doing your plumber thing, making decent money, being stable. That's what you're good at. I was literally a bookmark in her life story, something she could close and come back to when she finished the fun chapters. Good to know where I stand, I said. Don't be dramatic. I'm being honest. Most guys would appreciate that instead of me lying and stringing them along. I replied. You're right. I do appreciate the honesty. She smiled like she had just negotiated world peace and went back to scrolling through Instagram, looking at some influencers' Bali vacation pics. See? You get it. You're mature like that. That night I made a decision that would change everything. But first, I called my dad. She said, "What now?" He asked, his voice flat, which meant he was pissed. Dad doesn't do emotional outbursts. He gets quiet and dangerous. I'm just a phase, a placeholder until she's ready for the real thing. He responded, well, congratulations. You just got handed the best information you could possibly get. Most people waste years figuring out what you just learned in one conversation. I asked, what do you mean? He said, she told you exactly who she is and what you mean to her. Believe her. Now act accordingly. If I was just a phase, a placeholder until she was ready for serious stuff, then I'd start acting like it. No drama, no begging, just cold, practical adjustments. It started that weekend. She wanted to hit up some warehouse party downtown that Tiffany had found. Come on, it'll be amazing. The DJ is supposed to be incredible. I said, nah, I'm good. Have fun though. She was surprised but pleased. More freedom for her to do whatever. Finally, I was starting to think you were getting clingy. What she didn't know was that I'd started using those weekends for something way more productive. The first thing I did was stop investing in our relationship. Not in some petty revenge way, just practically. I stopped buying groceries for her place. Why stock someone's fridge if you're temporary? I stopped meeting her party friends because honestly, why network with people I'd never see again once she moved on? She didn't notice at first because she was too busy living her best life with Tiffany as her hype woman. Every weekend was some new adventure. Pool parties, music festivals, spontaneous road trips to Austin or Nashville. Her Instagram became this highlight reel of shots at rooftop bars and dancing at venues I'd never heard of. Meanwhile, I quietly started rebuilding my life. I signed up for that woodworking class I'd been putting off for years. Turns out I'm actually pretty decent with a table saw. I joined a hiking group that met Saturday mornings when she was usually hungover from whatever she'd done Friday night. I started volunteering at the local community center, teaching basic coding to kids. The big move was the house hunt. I'd been saving money for years from my plumbing jobs, always telling myself I was waiting for the right time or for us to be ready. Well, if there was no us in my future, why was I waiting? I found this incredible fixer-upper in Riverside. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a huge backyard. It needed serious work, but had amazing bones. Built in 1954, it had original hardwood floors, a sick mid-century fireplace, a kitchen straight out of the 1970s, and a bathroom with avocado green tiles. But I could see the potential. The inspection turned up some interesting surprises. Original copper plumbing that was actually in better shape than most modern houses I'd worked on. The electrical panel needed a complete overhaul, but everything else was solid. The foundation hadn't shifted an inch in 70 years. Dad came with me to look at it. He walked around for about 10 minutes, checked the foundation, looked at the electrical panel, and tested the water pressure. Roof's solid, the foundation's good, electrical needs some work but nothing major. You'd be stupid not to buy it. I asked, think I can handle all the renovation work? He said, kid, I've been teaching you this stuff since you were 8. Plus, I'm not dead yet. I can still swing a hammer. The previous owners had been an elderly couple who'd lived there for 40 years. They'd kept everything original, but maintained it perfectly. They even left behind a workshop in the garage, complete with a vintage workbench and tools from the 1950s. Dad nearly had a heart attack when he saw it. These tools are worth more than your down payment. I put in an offer without saying a word to Vanessa. She was at Coachella with Tiffany, posting stories of herself covered in glitter, dancing to DJs I'd never heard of. I got the text that my offer was accepted while she was sending me videos of some art installation shaped like a giant cactus. Miss you, babe, this is incredible. Can't wait to tell you about it. I texted back, have fun. Then went back to reviewing the inspection report with Dad. He asked, so, when are you going to tell Princess Party Girl about the house? I replied, why would I? She's not going to be living in it. Dad grinned. That's my boy. The hiking group was where everything started clicking into place. Every Saturday at 7 o'clock in the morning, we'd meet at different trailheads around the city. Way better than sleeping off hangovers until 2 in the afternoon, like I used to do when Vanessa was out partying. That's where I met Claire, a 23-year-old personal trainer with a really dry sense of humor that caught me off guard. Our first conversation was about trail mix. Whoever decided raisins belong in trail mix clearly hates joy, she said, picking them out of her bag. I replied, finally, someone with sense. Raisins are just disappointed grapes. She said, oh man, that's dark. I like it. We started hiking together more often, just as friends at first, since I was technically still with Vanessa, even though she'd made it clear I was just holding her place in line. Claire helped me pick out tile for the house renovation. Turns out she has really good taste and knows way more about home improvement than someone who spends all day at a gym should. I asked, why do you know so much about grout, while we were at Home Depot? She said, my dad's a contractor. I spent summers working for him instead of going to camp. Learned more about plumbing than most guys I train. She was right. The first day Claire came to help with the house, Dad was there installing new kitchen cabinets. I was nervous about them meeting, but I shouldn't have been. You must be Claire, Dad said, not looking up from his level. Albert's told me about you. She replied, all good things, I hope. He said, yeah, he said you have opinions about tile. That's either very good or very bad. Claire laughed. Depends on the tile, but yeah, I have opinions about most things. Dad said to me, I like her already. Then turned back to Claire. Can you hand me that drill and tell me what's your position on subway tile? She answered, timeless but overused. Good for resale value, boring for actual living. Dad nodded. Yep, I like her. Claire's construction knowledge was legit. She showed up the next weekend with her own tool belt and immediately spotted a problem with the kitchen layout that would have cost me thousands to fix later. You can't put the dishwasher there unless you reroute that gas line. See how it runs right behind where you want the cabinet? Dad was impressed. I was starting to fall for her. Meanwhile, Vanessa's party phase was escalating. Her Instagram posts were getting wilder. Photos with random guys at festivals, always captioned with stuff like, making memories with new friends, or life's too short to say no to adventures. Tiffany would comment things like, yes, queen, this is what your 20s should look like. Dad saw one of her posts when I was scrolling through my phone during a lunch break. God, she looks like she's about to overdose on attention. What's her endgame here? I replied, I don't think she has one. Tiffany's got her convinced this is what happiness looks like. The moment that really sealed it for me happened at the community center. I was teaching this 12-year-old kid named Mateo basic Python, and his mom came to pick him up. You're really good with kids, she said. Do you have any of your own? I answered. Not yet. Someday though. She said. Your girlfriend's lucky. Guys who are good with kids are rare. I almost laughed. My girlfriend was currently somewhere in the Nevada desert with Tiffany, probably rolling on Molly, explicitly not wanting kids or anything domestic like commitment. That night, I texted Vanessa. We need to talk when you get back. She replied. Ooh, sounds serious. You're not about to propose, are you? Because that would be super awkward. With 5 laughing emojis. I texted back, yeah, definitely not. Vanessa got back from Burning Man 3 days later, looking like she'd been through a sandstorm, sunburned, exhausted, smelling like patchouli and regret. She came over to my apartment. I still hadn't mentioned the house. Tiffany had apparently stayed in Vegas for some after-party that was too epic to miss. So, what's this big serious talk? She asked. Please tell me you're not about to get all weird and clingy. I had such an amazing time, and I don't want to kill the vibe. Actually, I wanted to thank you, I said. She looked confused. Thank me for what? I replied. For being honest about what you think of me. It really clarified things. She looked uncomfortable. I didn't mean it in a bad way. I said. I know exactly how you meant it. You want to have fun now. Settle down later. I respect that, but I've realized I don't want to be anyone's phase. So, let's end this clean. She was shocked. Wait, what? You're breaking up with me? I said, we're breaking up with each other. You want to be free. I want to be valued. Win-win. She was genuinely shocked. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. I was supposed to wait around like a golden retriever, just happy when she came home. But we're good together. We work. I mean, you're perfect for me eventually. I replied. Eventually. Key word there. You're totally overreacting. I just need some time to figure things out. God, you're being so dramatic about this. I said, take all the time you need, just not on my clock. She responded, this is ridiculous. You know what? Fine, but don't come crawling back when you realize you threw away something good. Most girls wouldn't even be honest about this stuff. She left angry and confused. Within an hour, she was posting Instagram stories with quotes about knowing your worth and men who can't handle strong independent women who know what they want. Fine by me. I had crown molding to install. I called Dad afterward to let him know it was officially over. How'd she take it? He asked. About as well as you'd expect. Lots of dramatic quotes about men who can't handle honesty, he said. Good. Are you coming over tomorrow? That crown molding isn't going to install itself. After the breakup, Vanessa went into full party overdrive. Her Instagram became a non-stop highlight reel of clubs, festivals and adventures. Every post was about her newfound freedom and living authentically. Meanwhile, I was working on my new house. The hiking group became my weekly therapy session. Claire and I were hanging out more, just as friends, but good friends. She helped me pick out a new refrigerator when my ancient one finally died. We spent an entire Saturday at appliance stores, arguing about whether stainless steel or black stainless was better. Black stainless shows fingerprints less, she said. I replied, but regular stainless steel matches the dishwasher I already bought. She said, fair point. Also, you actually bought a dishwasher before you had a working kitchen. That's very optimistic of you. Dad was there too, of course. He said he's been optimistic about dumb stuff his whole life. At least this time, it's useful. Claire started spending more time at the house, helping with projects and just hanging out. Dad treated her like she'd been part of the family for years, which was his way of showing approval without actually saying it. Claire, can you hold this level while I mark these spots? Dad asked during a kitchen renovation session. Sure thing, Robert, she replied. He said, good. Albert, your girlfriend has steadier hands than you do. I corrected. She's not my girlfriend yet. Dad said, I heard that. Claire? You hear that? He said, yet. Claire grinned. I heard it. Dad said, excellent. Now both of you shut up and help me install this cabinet. Apparently Tiffany was keeping tabs on my social media and reporting back to Vanessa. I'd post normal stuff, pictures from hiking, the kids at the coding camp, my attempt at making homemade pasta. An epic failure, but hilarious. This bothered Vanessa because it meant I was doing fine without her. Tiffany started commenting on my posts with passive-aggressive remarks like, wow, someone's really embracing the single life, good for you, and hope you're not just posting the highlights while you're actually miserable inside. I blocked her after the third comment. Then Vanessa started showing up places. the coffee shop I went to Sunday mornings, the gym. She even showed up at the community center, claiming she wanted to volunteer. "Albert, wow, funny running into you here," she said. I replied, "Hey Vanessa, here to volunteer with the kids?" She said, "Yeah, totally. I love kids. Want to give back, you know." The coordinator started asking about her availability. Suddenly, she remembered she had a trip to Mexico planned with Tiffany, then a festival in Colorado, then a girls' weekend in Vegas. She never came back. The real explosion happened when she found out about the house. Not from me, but from our mutual friend William, who'd helped me move my couch. My phone blew up. "You bought a house? When were you going to tell me? I can't believe you made that decision without me. We talked about buying a house together." That last one made me actually laugh out loud. We had never, not once, talked about buying anything together. She'd specifically said she wasn't ready to settle down. I finally responded, "I bought a house for my future. You made it clear you weren't part of that future. Why would I consult you?" She replied, "Because we were together for 2.5 years. That's a huge decision." I said, "Were. Past tense. Your choice. You're being so petty about this. It's not like I said I never wanted to be with you." I responded, "You said I was a phase, a placeholder. Those were your exact words." She tried calling like 15 times. I was busy helping Claire plant tomatoes in my new backyard. Turns out she knows everything about gardening too. That night she went nuclear on social media, posting a long rant about men who make major life decisions in secret and can't communicate properly. Tiffany, from a new fake account, was all over the comment section backing her up, calling me manipulative and clearly threatened by Vanessa's independence. Her whole squad rallied around her, saying I was shady and deceptive. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who told me I was just a phase was mad that I planned a future without her. Things stayed quiet for about a month. I was living in the house, still doing renovations, but it was totally livable. The vegetable garden was actually producing food. Life was genuinely good. Claire and I had started dating officially. We took it slow, but it was different from day one. She talked about future plans, like I was obviously going to be there. She made dinner reservations 2 weeks out without hedging. It was weird how refreshing that was. Dad loved watching us together. "This is what normal looks like," he told me one day while we were installing new baseboards. "No drama, no games, just two people who actually like each other." I said, "It's nice." He corrected, "Nice? That's the best you can do? It's not nice, it's healthy. There's a difference." Then Vanessa's 25th birthday hit, and apparently it triggered some kind of existential crisis. Her Instagram shifted from party pics to inspirational quotes about new chapters and growth. Her posts got more philosophical, less about shots, and more about authentic living. She texted me, "Hey, I've been doing a lot of thinking. Can we talk?" I was curious enough to say yes. We met at a neutral coffee shop downtown, the kind of place with exposed brick and overpriced lattes. She looked different, less party girl, more tired, like she'd been running on fumes for months and finally ran out of gas. "Thanks for meeting me. I know things ended weird between us," she said. I asked, "What's up, Vanessa?" She said, "I've been thinking about what I really want, like really thinking, and I realize I was being immature before. I'm ready now." I asked, "For what?" She replied, "To settle down, to be serious. I got all the party stuff out of my system. I'm ready for the next chapter with you." She said it like she was doing me a favor, like I should be grateful she'd finally decided I was worth her time. I said, "So because you're ready now, I should just be available." She responded, "We were good together, Albert. You know we were. I just needed time to grow up and experience things. Now I have, and I know what I want." I asked, "And what made you think I was just sitting around waiting because you loved me?" She said, "I know you did. That doesn't just disappear. Plus, let's be real. You're a plumber. It's not like you have tons of options." Even now she was talking down to me. I replied, "You're right. I did love you. Past tense. You told me I was just a phase, so I acted accordingly. I didn't mean it like that." I said, "You meant it exactly like that. You wanted to party and have fun without me, then settle for me when you were done, like I was a retirement plan." She started crying. Not sad tears, but frustrated tears. "So what? You're punishing me? Is that what the house was about? To hurt me?" I said, "The house is about building my future. A future you explicitly said you didn't want to be part of, yet I took you at your word. She asked. I saw you with that girl on Instagram, the trainer. Is this about her? I replied. Claire? Her name is Claire, and no, this isn't about her. It's about me choosing to be with someone who doesn't see me as something to settle for later. That hit home. She physically flinched. I never said for you. I reminded her. Settling down with me was what you'd do when you were done having fun, your exact words. That makes me the safe, boring choice for after the party ends. She said, so that's it? 2.5 years together and you just move on like I meant nothing. I replied, 2.5 years, and you moved on first. You just expected me to stay in place while you did. She tried one last desperate play. What if I was pregnant? I almost walked out right there. Are you? I asked. She said, no, but what if I was? I replied, okay, even if you were, what makes you think I'd believe it's mine? She said, you're such an, I was honest with you, and this is how you repay me. She left angry, blocked me on everything, and posted more quotes about men who can't handle personal growth, and how sometimes people show their true colors when you're vulnerable. That evening, I was at the house with Dad and Claire, installing new light fixtures in the dining room. I told them about the coffee shop meeting. Claire asked. She actually said, you don't have options because you're a plumber. I confirmed. Word for word. Dad put down his screwdriver. That girl has no idea what she just walked away from, twice. I asked, what do you mean twice? He said, once when she decided you were a phase, again today when she assumed you'd be grateful for her scraps. He picked up his screwdriver again. Her loss. Claire, can you flip that breaker back on? She replied, sure thing, Robert. He said, good. Now, let's see if Albert wired this right, or if we need to call a real electrician. Vanessa's rejection apparently sent her into a complete spiral. According to mutual friends, she became obsessed with proving I was making a mistake. Tiffany was feeding into this hard, constantly telling her that I was obviously rebounding and that Claire was just a gym bunny who doesn't know the real me like Vanessa does. The harassment started small. Vanessa would drive by the house when I was working in the yard. She'd sit in her car across the street for like 20 minutes just watching. I ignored it at first, figuring she'd get bored and move on. Dad noticed first. Blue Honda keeps driving by. Same one's been parked across the street 3 times this week. That's Vanessa stalking now. Classy. He didn't look up from the deck railing he was sanding. Want me to go have a chat with her? I said, nah, she'll get bored eventually. He replied, if you say so, but if she escalates, I'm not asking permission next time. Then Tiffany started following me around town. She'd show up at the grocery store I went to, the coffee shop. Always with her phone out, pretending to be casual while obviously taking pictures. She'd report back to Vanessa about everything, who I was with, what I was buying, even what I was wearing. Tiffany got bold enough to accidentally bump into Claire at the gym during peak hours. She made a huge scene, apologizing loud enough for everyone to hear, then started this fake conversation. Oh my god, you're Albert's new girl, he's such a catch. I can't believe Vanessa let him go. She's been such a mess since the breakup. Like seriously struggling. Maybe you could talk to him about giving her another chance. Claire handled it like a pro. I think Vanessa's struggles are between her and her therapist, not me and my boyfriend. Tiffany's face went red. Things escalated when Vanessa and Tiffany figured out Claire's schedule. They started showing up at the gym where she worked, coincidentally needing day passes to work out. They'd make loud comments about how some people just go for the first rebound they find, and how it's sad when men can't handle being alone. Claire handled it better than I did. They're just jealous. Vanessa had something good and threw it away. Now she's seeing what she lost. But it got worse. Tiffany started messaging Claire on Instagram with fake concern. Hey girl, just wanted to give you a heads up about Albert. He's super controlling and manipulative. Ask him about how he made Vanessa feel like she couldn't have friends or go out. He's just putting on an act for you. Claire showed me the messages. She's really trying hard to break us up. I asked. What did you tell her? She said that she should find a hobby that doesn't involve other people's relationships. Dad's response was more direct. Block her. Block them both. And if they show up at your work again, call the police. Vanessa and Tiffany doubled down. They started spreading rumors to mutual friends about how I was love-bombing Claire and how they were worried about her because I was showing all the red flags of an abuser. The same tactics abusers actually use, isolating their target by making everyone else seem untrustworthy. The flowers started appearing on my porch 2 weeks later, no cards, just flowers. Every few days, new ones would show up. I threw them away, but they kept coming. Secret admirer? Dad asked, seeing me carry another arrangement to the trash. I said, Vanessa. She's losing her mind. He replied, no, she's trying to make you lose yours. Don't let her. Then Claire started getting packages at work. Designer workout clothes, expensive supplements, gift cards to fancy restaurants, all anonymous. But we both knew who was sending them. It was like Vanessa was trying to buy Claire's loyalty, or prove she had money to throw around. The final straw was when Tiffany called Claire's boss, claiming I was harassing Claire and that she was concerned for her safety. Claire's boss had to sit her down and ask if everything was okay at home. It was humiliating for her, and potentially damaging to her career. That night, I called a lawyer and explained the situation, the stalking, the harassment of Claire, the attempts to damage her reputation. He said I had enough for a restraining order against both of them. Document everything, he said. Save all the messages, take pictures of the flowers, get statements from witnesses. This is textbook stalking and harassment. I filed the paperwork on Monday morning. Vanessa and Tiffany were served Tuesday afternoon. The restraining order required them to stay 500 feet away from me, my house, my workplace, and Claire. Dad was installing a new kitchen backsplash when I got home with the paperwork. How'd it go? He asked. I said, restraining orders in effect. They've been served. He replied, good. Should have done it weeks ago. Think it'll actually stop them? I said, if they have any sense, yeah. If not, well, they'll learn the hard way that judges don't care about your feelings. For about a week, it was quiet. I thought maybe the legal reality check had finally gotten through to them. I was wrong. Last Friday night I was at home working on refinishing the back deck when I heard someone on my front porch. It was almost 11 at night, so I figured it was a delivery that got dropped off late. I opened the door to find Vanessa sitting on my porch steps, clearly drunk, surrounded by about 24 roses. She was crying, makeup running down her face, holding a drink. Albert, please. I just want to talk. I love you. I've always loved you. Tiffany was wrong. I should have never listened to her. I want to come home. I said, Vanessa, you can't be here. You have a restraining order. She replied, I don't care about that stupid paper. This is my home too. We can work this out. She tried to stand up and stumbled. The bottle fell and shattered on my concrete steps. I said, you need to leave now. I'm calling the police. She panicked. No, please just listen to me. Claire doesn't know you like I do. She's just using you for your house and your money. I'm the one who really loves you. I already had my phone out, dialing 911. Vanessa heard me and started panicking more. Albert, no, please don't do this. I'll leave. Okay, I'll go right now. But she was too drunk to even walk properly. She fell trying to get off the porch, scraped her knee, and started crying harder. The cops showed up about 10 minutes later. 2 officers, both professional, but clearly not surprised by the situation. Sir, can you explain what's happening here? One asked. I showed them the restraining order and explained the situation. Vanessa was still on my lawn, now lying in the grass, crying about how she'd made a mistake and just wanted to fix things. Ma'am, you're under arrest for violating a restraining order. You have the right to remain silent. They cuffed her and put her in the back of the patrol car. One officer stayed to take my statement while the other called for someone to clean up the broken glass. Has she contacted you since the restraining order was issued? The officer asked. I said, no direct contact, but she's been driving by the house. I have security camera footage. He said, we'll need copies of that. This probably won't be her only violation. The officer's partner came back with a tow truck driver. Turns out Vanessa had parked her car illegally on my street before stumbling up to my porch. They were impounding it along with arresting her. The tow truck guy was pulling her Honda onto his flatbed while she watched from the back seat, still crying. That's going to cost her at least $300 to get out of impound, the cop said. Plus bail, plus court costs. Expensive night. I watched them drive away with Vanessa in the back seat, still crying, probably facing a night in jail and additional charges. Dad showed up about 20 minutes later. I'd called him after the cops left. You okay? He asked, looking at the rose petals scattered across my porch. I said, yeah, I'm fine. Just glad it's finally over. He asked, is it though? Over, I mean. I replied, has to be. She's looking at real jail time now. Claire arrived a few minutes later. Dad and I were sweeping up glass while she picked up rose petals. You know what's weird? Claire said. I almost feel sorry for her. She had something real with you and threw it away because her friend convinced her she could do better. Dad said, Tiffany didn't convince her of anything. She just gave Vanessa permission to act on what she already wanted. Tiffany was just the excuse. I looked around my house, the kitchen I'd renovated, the garden we'd planted, the life I'd built. Claire was right. Vanessa had traded something real for something that looked good on social media. Her loss. I said, I'm exactly where I want to be. Dad finished sweeping up the last of the glass. Should have listened to me from the beginning. I told you that girl was trouble. I said, yeah, you did. He replied, of course I did. It's my job to spot the crazy ones before they waste your time. Although, to be fair, this one wasted way more of her time than yours. Vanessa was right about one thing. She wasn't done having fun yet. Turns out neither was I. I just found a better definition of it. One that didn't involve waiting around for someone to decide I was worth settling for. The best part, it wasn't even revenge. It was just building the life I wanted with people who wanted to be in it right now, not after they finished their phase. Vanessa wanted me to be a phase in her life, something she'd come back to when the party ended. Instead, she became exactly what she designated me as, just a phase, one I'd grown out of. She's probably getting booked right now, facing charges for violating a restraining order. Me? I'm in my house with my garden, with someone who doesn't see me as a placeholder for when she's ready to get serious. Dad's here making sure I don't do anything stupid, and Claire's here because she wants to be. All right, Dad said, putting the broom away. Crisis over. Claire, you staying for dinner? I'm making my famous chili. Claire asked, is it actually famous? He replied, depends on your definition of famous. Albert's been eating it for 20 years and he's not dead yet. I said, that's not exactly a ringing endorsement. He shot back, you want a ringing endorsement? It's better than anything you cook. Claire said, he's not wrong. Dad grinned. See, she gets it. I like this one, Albert, don't screw it up. I said, I won't. He replied, good. Now let's go inside before the neighbors start talking about the crazy woman who got arrested in your front